Chapter 45:18. Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up. More soul strands appeared between his eyebrows as he unleashed the bloodline power of God Shibai. Wu the flying crane immortal beast seemed to have sensed Xiaohua's abnormality and swung its huge tail at him. Amidst the whistling of the wind, the soul strands were destroyed one after another. The power of the bloodline backlash was generated from Xiaohua's body. Alas, Xiaohua sighed. He now understood that although he could use his soul cultivation in this space, his soul cultivation strength was far inferior to that of the flying crane immortal beast. Even if he used these soul cultivation divine abilities, he would only attract the suspicion of Fairy Xingyu and Suji. He would not be able to change the situation of the battle. Since the power of the soul can't do anything, then I'll use the other most primitive power in this world. Xiaohua thought as he waved the immortal weapon in his hand. Wu it smashed towards the flying crane immortal beast. Pung with a loud bang, the flying crane immortal beast's huge tail hit Xiaohua's immortal weapon. Xiaohua's body was flipped over and landed far away. However, the flying crane immortal beast's body also shook violently. Its previously unstoppable momentum was suppressed by this strike. Whoosh! Just as Xiaohua was sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, Fairy Xingyu and Suji, who were also sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, moved as well. Before their bodies landed, they immediately shot out like flying arrows and flew towards Xiaohua's direction. Whoosh! The phalanx immortal beast landed in the sky. It no longer needed to flap its wings, but with a flap of its 3 legs, it chased after the 2 cultivators like a shooting star. Its 2 beak-like beaks even tore through the sky and bit down on the 2 cultivators. The flying crane immortal beast's beak was so powerful that with one bite, it devoured the space within 100 feet. Naturally, Suji and Fairy Xingyu's bodies were also devoured. Even before their bodies arrived, the silver light on the surface of their bodies had already entered the beast's mouth. Damn it! Fairy Xingyu panicked. She raised her hand and threw out an unknown immortal artifact. Then she flicked her finger. Boom! The immortal artifact exploded in the collapsed space behind her. Although it was not refined by Fairy Xingyu and the power of the explosion was much weaker, the force of the explosion still shattered the collapsed space. However, right at this moment, the spearhawk closed its mouth and the explosion and void disappeared. When it opened its mouth again, everything was gone. This is the power of the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu was also shocked. She thought to herself, I'm afraid that it's really as recorded in the ancient books of the Palace of Justice. Only the energy-gathering celestial has the power to win. However, while Fairy Xingyu was still in shock, she used the previous explosion and the shockwave to fly far away. What Fairy Xingyu could think of and do, Suji could do as well. Suji did not wait to land. With a wave of his hand, several thunderbolts roared and rushed out. He also moved close to the ground. At this time, Suji did not care about the collapse of his body. Silver light danced on the surface of his body, like a flickering shadow. In the blink of an eye, he was more than 1,000 feet away. Wu the flying crane immortal beast that attacked Suji swept its tail. The entire space was filled with the explosive sound of immortal spirit chi. The space was split open by the flying crane immortal beast. Suji didn't dare to fight anymore. He raised his hands and 2 lightning swords shot out. Although they only managed to shatter a few of the scales on the tail, Suji had already reversed the force from the tail. Using the ingenious method of borrowing force to counteract force, he accelerated once again. Wu, seeing that Suji and Fairy Xingyu had dodged the 2 attacks and took the opportunity to escape, the 2 flying crane immortal beasts were furious. They spread their wings and rushed into the air. In a flash, they flew above the 2 people. Then the top of the 2 flying crane immortal beasts' heads lit up. The red bulge suddenly shone brightly. Dozens of fist-sized flames flew out from this light and covered Suji and Fairy Xingyu. When these dozens of flames fell into the air, immortal spirit chi immediately poured in. The flames suddenly turned into pillars of fire and fell with a loud bang, trying to imprison Suji and Fairy Xingyu. Damn it! It's really like a tiger being bullied by a dog. Fairy Xingyu was really angry. Even if the flying crane immortal beasts were powerful, when had she ever been bullied to this extent by immortal beasts? She could not help but curse. The silver light around her was activated like a waterfall. The star blade and the moon blade in her hands swung out respectively. The saber light was like lightning, immediately splitting several pillars of fire. Even the star shuttle that was flying with Fairy Xingyu pierced into one of the pillars of fire and destroyed it. However, just as these pillars of fire were extinguished, a slightly cold flame seeped into Fairy Xingyue's silver light and quickly entered her body. Oh no! Fairy Xingyue was really anxious when she saw the flame invading her body. She did not care about destroying the pillars of fire anymore. She pointed her thumb at the top of her head. Poof! The brilliance of the stars and moon poured down like a spring, protecting her body. The brilliance rushed toward the flame, trying to extinguish it. Just as Fairy Xingyue was trying to save herself, the flying crane immortal beast's thick tail swept down from the void again, aiming for Fairy Xingyue's chest. Now that Fairy Xingyue was in danger, how could Su Ji, who only had 40% of his cultivation in the immortal world, escape? The sparks that flowed out of the flying crane immortal beast's head turned into pillars of fire that trapped Su Ji. Su Ji waved the lightning in his hand and destroyed several pillars of fire in front of him. Suddenly, he realized that the flame was like flowing water, following the lightning in his hand and invading his body. Su Ji did not hesitate at all. With one hand like a knife, he cut off his other hand from his body. At the same time, he opened his mouth and a thunder talisman surrounded by lightning was about to spit out. However, the flying crane immortal beast's 3 legs fell from 3 directions. Su Ji did not know how many of them his thunder talisman could block. At this critical moment, the cries of the flying kite immortal beasts rang out once more. 2 even larger flying kite immortal beasts descended from the sky above the blazing sky palace. Damn it! Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue were shrouded in the shadows of the flying crane immortal beasts. It was as if the shadow of death had fallen. Both of them were disheartened. However, just as the 2 of them looked at each other with despair in their eyes, a strange sound rang out again. Ga. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue were stunned. When they looked above them again, they were ecstatic. This was because the next 2 flying crane immortal beasts' legs did not land on Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue, but on the backs of the first 2 flying crane immortal beasts. The 2 flying crane immortal beasts, who were determined to kill Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue, did not dare to kill them. They spread their wings and swung their tails high into the sky, crushing the space within a few hundred feet to meet the 6 sharp claws. The sharp claws collided with the tails. Amidst the roar, the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts tumbled violently in the air. The larger flying crane immortal beast showed no mercy. Its sharp claws danced and grabbed the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts' backs, instantly tearing off some of their scales. The 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts also swung their claws while tumbling, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Damn it, this is what it means to meet a worthy opponent. You guys have a good fight. Of course, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue did not think that the 2 flying crane immortal beasts had come to save them. However, at this moment, their eyes were filled with ecstasy. They looked at each other and muttered to themselves. Then, they sneaked past the pillars of fire that had not yet been extinguished and flew toward Xiaohua. While the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts were no match for the flying crane immortal beast. After a few rounds, they were already drenched in blood. One of them could not help but cry out in a low voice. While Xiaohua was sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, the flying crane immortal beast was also blocked in midair. The flying crane immortal beast was stunned at first, then its bestial nature erupted. Its wings flapped crazily, and 3 sharp claws slammed down like rain, wanting to slap Xiaohua, this little thing, to death. Seeing that the flying crane immortal beast did not activate its flames and only used its sharp claws, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He waved his immortal weapon with both hands and used the ethereal steps. He used the sky-piercing staff technique to fight the flying crane immortal beast. Although Xiaohua was powerful now and was not restricted by the 9 levels of essence force of the 3 continents in this space fragment, he could not be compared to the essence-gathering immortal that Fairy Xingyue had imagined. After fighting with the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws for a while, he already felt weak and numb. The flying crane immortal beast took advantage of the chaos and swung its claws at Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua's body, which was incomparably tough in the 1,000 Demons' sacred realm, was as weak as mud under the flying crane immortal beast's claws. Several bloody marks instantly appeared. While Xiaohua was greatly shocked, his figure swayed, and he'd just dodged the sharp claws when the flying crane immortal beast roared and opened its mouth. The space above Xiaohua's head was swallowed up, and an extremely powerful suction force enveloped Xiaohua along with the ground. Seeing that the ground nearby was about to be torn apart, some corpses on the ground were being sucked in, and even some immortal weapons were being swallowed by the flying crane immortal beast. Xiaohua was quick-witted. He waved the immortal weapon in his hand and picked up the armor, immortal weapons, and other items within a radius of several hundred feet. He swept them into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth, and used the momentum to escape into the distance. Boom boom! The flying crane immortal beast's suction force was very powerful. The armor and other items that fell into the beast's mouth all exploded. However, the explosions were like fireworks, and even though Xiaohua tried his best to escape, he still couldn't escape the range of the flying crane immortal beast's suction force. Bang! 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 Xiaohua's face went pale, and in his panic, he circulated his soul technique once more, causing string after string of three corpses in lightning to appear behind him. Unfortunately, even an immortal artifact was unable to cause any waves in the mouth of the skyhawk. So what effect could these top-grade Dharma techniques of the cultivation world have? The three corpses in lightning only stopped the flying crane immortal beast for a moment before the beast's mouth came down again. What made Xiaohua most sullen was that one of the flying crane immortal beast's claws had reached his back at some point. Rip! Not only did it tear apart Xiaohua's star armor and Daoist robe, it also knocked Xiaohua to the ground. His body rolled on the ground, and the Grand Ascension stage human race's face was completely swept away. Chapter 45:19. At this point, Xiaohua could no longer consider hiding anything. His mind was about to enter the space, ready to summon Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, and the others to fight. It was also at this moment, huge thunderbolts surged over like a flood. Swish 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 after the thunderbolts, the light pillars of stars and moons also crazily bombarded. The pillars of lightning, starlight, and moonlight all entered the mouth of the flying crane immortal beast, temporarily dispersing the enormous devouring power. Roar! The flying phalanx immortal beast was furious. It raised its head and let out a long howl. Its angry gaze shifted away from Xiaohua's body, which was rolling like a pellet, and looked behind it. In the sky, Suji and Fairy Xingyu had quietly arrived. They each used their immortal spiritual power to save Xiaohua. The flying crane immortal beast spread its wings, and the entire space was filled with crimson flames. The bulge on its forehead was also flashing with brilliance. Fairy Xingyu secretly complained, while Suji roared, "Xingyu, you and I split up. I will lead the flying crane immortal beast to another place. You take Xiaohua and rush into the Heaven's Palace." Fairy Xingyu gritted her teeth and said, "All right, be careful." Just as Suji was about to fly up, another anxious roar came from behind Suji and Fairy Xingyu. The flying crane immortal beast that was pouncing towards Suji and Fairy Xingyu was startled, and looked up into the distance. Suji saw this and hurriedly descended, quietly hiding beside a corpse. Fairy Xingyu also slowly descended. Sure enough, before Fairy Xingyu could hide herself, the flying crane immortal beast roared and flapped its wings, flying towards the battle in the distance. Let's go! Suji saw that the flying crane immortal beast had just flown away, and his figure immediately moved, rushing towards Xiaohua like a wisp of smoke. At this moment, Xiaohua was in an extremely sorry state. The bronze-colored skin on his back was exposed. Streaks of blood seemed to be facing outwards. Although there was no blood seeping out, the wounds were slowly wriggling and couldn't heal very quickly. Looking at Xiaohua's body, he was stained with some mud. Although he was holding an immortal artifact in his hand, his arm was still slightly trembling. Clearly, he had used too much strength. Suji flew over his head, and without even looking at him, he grabbed him with his big hand. His figure fell rapidly again, and his flying speed also decreased. Damn it, what do I need that piece of junk for? Fairy Xingyu, who had originally been following Suji, overtook him all of a sudden. She looked at the immortal weapon Xiaohua was talking about and said in a low voice, "Even if you have it, you are no match for the winged crane immortal beast. Big sister." Xiaohua laughed bitterly and said, With this, I might not be able to defeat the flying crane immortal beast, but I can at least preserve my life. If you don't have it, you can only collect my corpse. Quick. Suji had been paying attention to what was behind him. At this moment he urged loudly, Xingyue, don't say any more. The flying crane immortal beast has already noticed that we have left. Hearing this, Fairy Xingyu naturally turned her head back. Sure enough, with the addition of the last Nimbus immortal beast, the situation of the battle immediately became complicated. In just a moment, the two larger Nimbus immortal beasts were also injured by the three Nimbus immortal beasts. They had no choice but to slow down their attacks. Now that the battle had slowed down, the phalanx immortal beasts thought of their prey and looked at Suji and the others. I'll help you. Fairy Xingyu did not dare to be negligent. She raised her hand and waved it, and a huge hand of stars and moon fell. Together with Suji, she grabbed Xiaohua and rushed to the gate of the Heavens Mansion with Xiaohua. While seeing that their prey was escaping, the two larger Nimbus immortal beasts spread their wings and pounced at Suji and the others with a roar. Boom! Unfortunately, before they could fly more than 300 meters, the three smaller Nimbus immortal beasts were even faster. They fell from the top of the two Nimbus immortal beasts' heads and smashed their tails mercilessly on the necks of the two Nimbus immortal beasts. The two Nimbus immortal beasts were furious. They curled their tails and stretched out their sharp claws again. Caw 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 with an ear-piercing sound, another Nimbus immortal beast's scales were torn and fell. In an instant, the five Nimbus immortal beasts were fighting again. Fu Xiaohua was taken to the gate of the Heavens Mansion by the two immortals. When he turned around and saw the five Nimbus immortal beasts fighting, he could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. He could not help but cry out, "Damn it, this kind of space fragment. No cultivator on the three continents can walk out alive, right?" "Of course," Fairy Xingyu sneered. "Even we have to suffer under the sharp claws of the Nimbus immortal beasts. How can others leave alive?" Suji also said with lingering fear. "I guess this is also the reason why the Star Moon Palace disappeared from the three continents." Fairy Xingyu nodded. "I was also surprised earlier. Since the three continents have tokens to enter and exit the Star Moon Palace, there is no reason why there is no news about the Star Moon Palace. I guess the cultivators who entered the Star Moon Palace in the past were unlucky enough to encounter these Nimbus immortal beasts. Or maybe there are other Nimbus immortal beasts that are even more powerful. They were all wiped out here, leaving no clues behind. Oh no! Quick!" She had only said a few words when the battle between the five Nimbus immortal beasts came to an end. Another Nimbus immortal beast rushed out of the battle and pounced on Suji and the others. At this time, Suji and the others were only a few hundred meters away from the Yiqiong Heavenly Mansion. "Let's fight!" Suji roared, and the silver light around him shone brightly. Fairy Xingyu was anxious and shouted, "Suji, don't!" Before she could finish speaking, lightning flashed under Suji's feet and pieces of flesh and blood dripped down. His flying speed increased greatly as he carried Xiaohua. Seeing that Suji's fight was to speed up, Fairy Xingyu finally heaved a sigh of relief. She also hurriedly urged the remaining immortal chi to speed up. Swoosh swoosh, swoosh! Even Suji and Fairy Xingyu were not as fast as the Nimbus immortal beasts, let alone Xiaohua, who was carrying a heavy object. The three of them had only flown a few hundred meters. When they were halfway there, the Nimbus immortal beasts had already caught up. This time, the two groups of Nimbus immortal beasts had a tacit understanding. Two of the larger Nimbus immortal beasts rushed toward Suji, while the three Nimbus immortal beasts that came first pounced on Fairy Xingyu. Xiaohua was already regarded as an easy prey. Seeing that the five Nimbus immortal beasts were waving their sharp claws at Suji and Fairy Xingyu's heads, Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly shouted, "Leave me behind, run away from the palace gate, and run in the opposite direction." Suji and Fairy Xingyu were stunned and immediately understood. They looked at each other and urged their immortal chi on their arms at the same time. They threw Xiaohua toward the palace gate, turned around, and rushed into the distance. Seeing that the three of them had separated, the five Nimbus immortal beasts were obviously stunned. However, they did not have much time to think about it. Suji and Fairy Xingyu sped up. Just as one of the Nimbus immortal beasts was about to pounce on Xiaohua, the other two Nimbus immortal beasts roared, and stopped the Nimbus immortal beasts from splitting up. As a result, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts turned their wings and flew toward Suji and Fairy Xingyu. Xiao Hua's figure landed on the ground without a trace of stagnation. He flew toward the gate of the heavens abode like flowing water. It was only a distance of a few hundred meters. In the past, he could cover it with just a few steps. Now it was a matter of life and death. Boom! Xiao Hua had just flown halfway when he heard a roar behind him. Xiao Hua panicked. Damn it, aren't these Nimbus immortal beasts too powerful? Sure enough, when he looked back, Suji and Fairy Xingyu were already tumbling in the air and flying toward the palace gate. At this time, Xiao Hua himself had not reached the palace gate. Suji and Fairy Xingyu heard Xiao Hua's words and immediately came to their senses. They threw Xiao Hua aside and flew in the opposite direction of the palace gate. After flying for a while, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts had already flown above their heads and their sharp claws slammed down. At this time, Suji and Fairy Xingyu had a tacit understanding and swapped their positions. The exchange between the two of them was easy, but the attack of the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts was not easy to distinguish. The wings of the two groups of Nimbus immortal beasts collided almost at the same time. In an instant, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts pounced on each other again. Of course, this time, the Nimbus immortal beasts had learned their lesson. After swapping positions, they split up again and swung their tails at Suji and Fairy Xingyu. Suji and Fairy Xingyu had quietly retreated a little when the Nimbus immortal beasts were fighting. When they saw the huge tails sweeping toward them, they were overjoyed and activated their immortal artifacts to block them. Boom boom, 2 loud sounds rang out in succession. Suji and Fairy Xingyu were sent flying by the huge tails. Wasn't the direction of the Heaven's Abode Palace Gate? Damn it! Although the two immortals seemed to be in a sorry state, they were about to crash into the Heaven's Abode like meteors. Xiao Hua was still thousands of feet away from the Heaven's Abode Palace. Then, he rolled his eyes and raised his hand to pick up the immortal artifact. He pushed against the ground and exerted force in his hand. His whole body flew straight for more than 100 feet and landed on the ground. Then, Xiao Hua stumbled and ran for a few more feet. Once again, he pushed against the ground and his body flew again. After a few more times, and with Xiao Hua's secret soul cultivation flying technique, he managed to chase Suji and Fairy Xingyu back. Seeing Xiao Hua push himself up again, Suji and Fairy Xingyu understood. They stretched out their hands at the same time and grabbed Xiao Hua's body with their immortal qi. Then, the 3 of them rushed through the gate of the Heaven's Abode Palace. At this time, the sharp claws of the flying crane immortal beast had already fallen. With a swoosh, Xiao Hua's back was torn apart again. The 3 of them fell into the gate of the Heaven's Abode Palace. Suji and Fairy Xingyu let go of Xiao Hua at the same time. Xiao Hua's body drew an arc in the air and landed on the ground of the main hall. Amidst the whistling of the wind, there was a series of clattering sounds. Xiao Hua's slightly clumsy body smashed the corpses on the ground into a mess. Suji and Fairy Xingyu also staggered to the ground. Not only were their faces abnormally pale, but there were also some drops of sweat dripping from their foreheads and necks. Fairy Xingyu stood on the ground and wiped her forehead with her hand. Looking at the sweat, she smiled bitterly and said, "Is this sweat? I can't remember the last time I sweated." Chapter 45-20. Suji ignored Fairy Xingyu. He released his thought extending and scanned the ground. When his thought extending landed on a corpse, he hurried over and picked up a box-like fairy weapon from the corpse. As his thought extending passed, he took out a thumb-sized elixir. However, he just looked at it, then threw it on the ground and said, "Although these elixirs are useful, we can't take them. What a pity." "Suji, take this first." Fairy Xingyu smiled, took out a jade bottle, and threw it to Suji. Suji was slightly stunned. He took the jade bottle with a wry smile, took out a blue elixir, and swallowed it. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground and adjusted his breathing. Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiao Hua, took out another jade bottle and swallowed it. Then she looked at Xiao Hua and asked, "Xiao Hua, these elixirs I refined are not suitable for you. Your injuries seem to be superficial. As long as you get out of this space fragment, you should be able to heal yourself, right?" "Senior, you're right." Xiao Hua nodded. "I don't need to waste elixirs. This junior will stand guard for the seniors. No need. It's safe in the heaven mansion now, Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. Those Nimbus immortal beasts don't dare to enter. You should rest for a while. We'll discuss. Unfortunately, before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, another roar of the Nimbus immortal beasts came from outside the door. Then, a gust of wind and flames rushed in from outside the door. The smaller Nimbus immortal beast was the first to rush in. How is that possible? Startled, Fairy Xingyu cried out. If these flying jade immortal beasts could rush into the heaven mansion would have been in a mess. Now, there are no traces of the Nimbus immortal beasts coming in and out of the heaven mansion. They obviously don't dare to come in. Maybe they couldn't before Suji suddenly opened his eyes, glanced at the Nimbus immortal beasts rushing in, and said, they didn't even dare to get close to the heaven mansion. Now, I'm afraid they don't have any scruples. The heaven mansion is going to suffer. Hiss. Although Suji said Yiqiong Heavenly Prefecture, Fairy Xingyu knew what he meant. When the three of them arrived at the Yiqiong Heavenly Prefecture, the entire Heavenly Prefecture did not show any signs of being destroyed by the flying crane immortal beast. Clearly, the aura of the corpses of the two celestial venerables had forced them to stay away. Now that they had collected the corpses of the two celestial venerables, the aura of the two celestial venerables had disappeared. Naturally, the phalanx immortal beasts could approach the immortal mansion without fear. Although there was a restriction around the immortal mansion, it was limited to the surroundings. They didn't know how to activate the restriction in front of the door, so the phalanx immortal beasts could enter the immortal mansion. Motherfucker. Even this so-called heavenly abode can't stop the flying kite immortal beast. Are we all going to die here? This shard of the celestial realm is really killing me. Xiaohua was even more shocked, and he cursed furiously in his heart. But he didn't dare dally, and he waved his immortal artifact to greet them while he said, Senior, quickly heal your injuries. I'll obstruct them for a while. Get out of the way. How could Suji still care about healing? He hurriedly got up and shouted, Xiaohua, you're no match for them. As he spoke, Suji raised his hand and grabbed. A shadow condensed from lightning had already passed through his hand and landed on the flying kite immortal beast. Whoosh! How could the flying kite immortal beast be afraid of this shadow? It opened its mouth and spat out a crimson pillar of fire, which collided with the palm shadow. With a boom, the pillar of fire was annihilated, and the shadow also disappeared. That powerful airflow almost flipped Xiaohua over. Ow! At this time, behind the flying kite immortal beast, another flying kite immortal beast was obviously bigger. It seemed to be another group. Xingyu. Suji raised his head and looked around, then shouted, Let's split up and rush into the heavenly abode to see if there's a restriction to avoid the flying kite immortal beast. Okay. Fairy Xingyu hesitated for a moment. Then her figure flashed and flew in another direction. Senior, seeing that Suji was coming to save him, Xiaohua hurriedly shouted, Although I don't have any magic power, I know the art of fighting. The main hall of the heavenly abode is not like the outside. There are pillars, corridors, and other obstacles. Although the flying kite immortal beast is powerful, it may not be able to do anything to me. Senior, you'd better hurry to the depths of the heavenly abode to find a way to kill the flying kite immortal beast. Now there are only 5 flying kite immortal beasts. We can still deal with them. If a few more come, we'll really die without a burial place. As he spoke, Xiaohua waved his celestial artifact again, and his figure jumped into the distance. His figure was quite agile, and he was hiding behind a huge pillar. Ow! At this time, the flying kite immortal beast had already stretched out its sharp claws to grab Suji. The other flying kite immortal beast flapped its wings and flew toward Fairy Xingyu. Okay, Suji thought for a moment, then quickly retreated and shouted, Be careful. I remember that there is a smaller hall in the depths of the heavenly abode. Go in and hide first. Crack! Just as Suji finished speaking, the flying kite immortal beast's sharp claws had already clawed down. As Suji dodged, the floor of the main hall was already cracked by the flying kite immortal beast's claws. Suji looked at the entrance of the hall again, and then he flicked his finger, causing a ball of lightning to shoot out. Rumble! A huge tremor resounded, and it drew the attention of the flying crane immortal beast that was charging over from Xiaohua. and then it urged its figure to charge towards the other side of the hall. Seeing that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue had lured the 3 flying kite immortal beasts away, Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. With a sweep of his mind, he put his celestial artifact into the space, and then used his soul cultivation flying technique to fly in another direction. As Xiaohua flew, he muttered in his heart, "Seniors, don't blame me for hiding it. This is a matter of life and death. If I reveal a bit of my divine ability in front of you, I will be hunted down even if I ascend to the immortal world in the future." Just as Xiaohua approached a huge pillar, his body fell rapidly and landed on the ground. Then he activated his soul power, and his entire body slowly straightened and changed into a square shape. This was the transformation technique that Xiaohua had comprehended from Qingqiu Mountain in the star-picking deck. Although this soul power was not as useful as Dao-sec dermic powers, Xiaohua's human appearance still changed a little. Xiaohua had just landed when the flying kite immortal beast's cries rang out behind the stone pillar. The last 2 flying kite immortal beasts also rushed into the main hall. One of them chased after Fairy Xingyue, while the other pounced on Xiaohua. However, after the flying kite immortal beast landed, Xiaohua's shadow was nowhere to be seen. The flying kite immortal beast's 3 legs moved step by step beside the huge pillar, and a powerful responding force swept across the ground inch by inch. The loud footsteps caused the entire hall to shake. Damn it! Xiaohua retracted his aura, leaving only a wisp of his consciousness outside. However, this wisp of consciousness swayed like withered grass in front of the valiant Ing Nian. Xiaohua could not help but curse angrily again. This young master has always been extremely lucky. Why is it that after arriving at the Star Moon Palace, my luck has become a complete mess? As if it had discovered something, the flying crane immortal beast approached the huge pillar with large strides. Its beak that was as hard as a crane's beak also slowly approached Xiaohua. An extremely fishy smell that carried an indescribable heat pressed toward Xiaohua. Admittedly, Xiaohua had already transformed and sealed off his 5 senses. However, the aura that was mixed with the echoing will still forced its way into Xiaohua's mind, mouth, and nose in waves. A feeling of being targeted involuntarily arose from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. In an instant, Xiaohua felt a sense of regret. He had been too smart for his own good. If he had escaped earlier, the flying kite immortal beast would only have chased after him. At this moment, he was completely exposed to the flying kite immortal beast's attack range. If the flying kite immortal beast sensed that something was wrong and immediately attacked, it would be too late even if he summoned Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, and the others from the space. PFFF at this moment, the flying kite immortal beast's sharp beak landed on Xiaohua's back. The heat almost melted Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua clenched his teeth and tried his best to endure the unspeakable pain. Fortunately, the flying kite immortal beast was only suspicious. After probing for a moment, its sharp beak left again. Boom! It landed on the corpse of an immortal general not far away, and shattered the armor. The immortal general's corpse also turned into nothingness in a ball of crimson fire. While the flying kite immortal beast took a few steps forward. As if it was angry, it roared at the sky and swept its tail horizontally. Boom! It hit the huge pillar. The pillar shook a few times, but it didn't fall. Boom, boom, boom! The flying kite immortal beast seemed to be venting its anger. It slammed into the pillar several times. Boom! The entire pillar finally collapsed. The roof of the palace that was already tilted fell again. Crashed! The huge rocks engraved with runes had lost their restrictive power. They fell one after another like rain. They hit Xiaohua and the flying kite immortal beast. Immediately after, the flying kite immortal beast let out a few hurried cries as if it was very happy. It spread its wings and flew in another direction. In just a short moment, the entire hall returned to a state of tranquility that had lasted for countless years. However, Xiaohua didn't move. He also didn't release his soul remembrance or consciousness. He was waiting for the flying kite immortal beast to return. After half a cup of tea's time, the entire palace didn't have any abnormalities. Xiaohua released his soul remembrance and looked for a moment. Then he raised his hand and pushed away the rocks that fell on him. Then he didn't even look and flew into the distance. After flying past a few palaces, there were no more sounds. Xiaohua stopped again. He looked around and found a platform to sit down. He thought to himself, damn it, it's too dangerous. The immortal realm is indeed not a place for people to stay right now, not to mention sneaking into the immortal realm through the passage of the Star Moon Palace. Even if the immortal realm's heavenly venerables invited me with 8 palanquins, I wouldn't go. I must cultivate my strength. Through ascension, I must temper my body in the spirit cleansing pool before going. Without the immortal spirit body and immortal spirit chi, I can't even defeat an immortal beast. What's the point of going to the immortal realm? Chapter 45:21. After resting for a while, Xiaohua looked at the mess in the hall and smiled again. Hee, I didn't dare to plunder at will outside Heaven's mansion for fear that Fairy Xingyu would see through it. Now that the flying jade immortal beast has entered Heaven's mansion, I'm afraid that the entire Heaven's mansion will be ruined by these beasts. Instead of that, it's better to let me take advantage of it. Thinking of this, Xiaohua released his mind. Whether it was the corpses, armor, immortal tools, storage bags, or the things in Heaven's mansion, they were all collected into the space like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. In just a moment, the entire hall was clean as if a dog had licked it. When the hall was clean, Xiaohua took out the wishful staff, looked around, and hit a giant pillar. Boom! The shaky roof of the hall fell, raising a burst of dust. Then, Xiaohua moved again, walking toward the depths of Heaven's mansion. Wherever he went, he swept away everything, and the halls collapsed one by one. As for Xiaohua's mind, he entered the space. When the figure of Jade Archive Xiaohua appeared, the figures of Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, Demon Venerable Shi, and others also appeared. Fellow Taoist Jade Archive Xiaohua did not delay, and told the story of the matter to his avatars. He asked straightforwardly, the situation is so urgent, do you have any good ideas? Big Brother Demon Venerable Shi shouted, I have no problem. This immortal chi conflicts with my devil chi, but I can use my means here. Forget it. Jade Archive Xiaohua's face was black. Once the devil blade appears, there is no need to wait for me to fly to the immortal world. Su Ji's immortal thunder will kill me. He is the punishment envoy of the punishment palace. How can he allow a cultivator with devil chi to fly to the immortal world? In that case, I can only act secretly. Taoist Witch asked faintly. Of course. Jade Archive Xiaohua replied without hesitation. Fellow Taoist is now a taboo in the immortal world. Although I don't know the reason, we'd better not touch it. I have no problem. Celestial Being said arrogantly. The immortal chi in this space fragment has no effect on me. Fellow Taoist, there's no problem. However, Jade Archive Xiaohua still shook his head and said, however, without that white bone, fellow Taoist wouldn't be a match for this bullshit immortal beast. However, if we take out white bone, Fairy Xingyu is a law envoy. She has great insight and might see through our methods. And, TSK, I don't need to say more. The most precious thing in this space fragment has been taken by us. When she finds out that something is wrong, she will definitely look for me. Taoistman smiled and said, since you can't do anything, my fellow Taoist, just keep hiding your true strength. Anyway, this heaven's abode seems to be of great importance. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu don't want you to know the details. You might as well pretend to be ignorant until the end. Playing dumb is a must. Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. The problem now is how to escape. It's not a big problem if it's just the 5 of them. Taoistman replied. In this space fragment of the immortal realm, it seems that the power of law of the 3 continents has lost its effectiveness. Fellow Taoist, I and Heavenly Tao can resist the immortal beasts. If you use your divine ability, of course, you can resist them too. However, it's best to avoid Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. However, if it's as you're worried, and there are more than 5 immortal beasts in this space fragment, then it'll be troublesome. We can only rely on the 2 immortals to find the place to escape from this space fragment first. Sigh, these 2 immortals are a little too arrogant. Taoist Wu sighed and said, or they have some scruples. Before entering the Star Moon Palace, they should have discussed it with you more. That's normal. Taoistman smiled and said, didn't we come to the Star Moon Palace with Xiongyi, Yuanya, and the others? Should we have discussed it with them? That's true. Demon Venerable Shi nodded. I'm just afraid that Fairy Xingyue is hiding something that will be disadvantageous to you. Fairy Xingyue may have selfish motives, but Suji won't. Jade Archive Xiaohua shook his head. As long as I'm with Suji, I don't have to worry about anything. The problem is that we're separated now. You have to be careful, big brother. Demon Venerable sure seemed to have a natural resistance to immortals and reminded him. I know. Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. You wait for a while to discuss. I'll go out first. After saying that, Xiaohua's mind left the space. However, after a moment, Xiaohua's mind fell on the continent where the immortal artifacts were. Then he raised his hand and a flying fork that was nearly 100 feet long landed in his hand. This flying fork was blue in color. When it landed in Jade Archive Xiaohua's hand, it still gave off a chill. Looking at the sharp tip of the flying fork, where pieces of ice appeared out of thin air, Jade Archive Xiaohua smiled and said, This immortal artifact is of the ice attribute, which is the nemesis of the immortal beasts. We'll rely on this to kill the immortal beasts. Unfortunately, even if I use all my magic power, I'm afraid I won't be able to pierce through the scales of the immortal beasts. I can only rely on Suji for this. However, Suji's divine ability hasn't recovered yet, so he probably won't be able to fully activate this immortal artifact. I still have to add some materials. After thinking for a while, Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand and several drops of Xiantian true water floated into the air. As Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed, the Xiantian true water fell into the spikes of the flying fork. After finishing his preparations, Jade Archive Xiaohua left the space again. However, he didn't bring the flying fork out of the space. He casually knocked over another stone pillar, and the entire palace collapsed. Xiaohua stepped into a collapsed palace. The roof of this palace was long gone. The broken pillars, some huge rocks, and the jade table all fell into the dust. Xiaohua looked around. His mind was like quicksilver as he put the jade table, pearls, and other things into the space. Then he turned around and looked outside the palace. Outside the palace was an even more spacious courtyard. There were many immortal herbs and immortal trees that Xiaohua didn't recognize. Moreover, because the restrictions of the heavenly abode were damaged during the battle, these immortal trees and immortal herbs weren't protected by any restrictions at all. They looked as if they could be picked by anyone. Seeing this, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He flew in front of a stalk of immortal grass. Just as he was about to reach out and grab it, he thought for a moment and stopped. After thinking for a bit, his mind entered the space again. When he came out, Xiaoguo also came out. Xiaoguo's body in the immortal spiritual energy was as he expected. Her spirit body wasn't affected by the immortal spiritual energy and didn't have any special discomfort. Xiaohua was overjoyed and said in a low voice, Xiaoguo, I'll leave this place too. Xiaoguo, what's wrong? Could it be that you can't stay in this space for a long time? No, Xiaoguo's small body trembled like a sieve. His red face was now as white as snow. His eyes flickered with extreme fear as he looked at the top of Xiaohua's head behind his back, stuttering as he spoke. Seeing this, Xiaohua's heart tightened even though he didn't have any warning signs in his heart. His mind wrapped around Xiaoguo, and he desperately urged his soul power. His body didn't move at all, as he flew into the distance. Wu Xiaohua's body had just moved when a gust of wind appeared behind Xiaohua. 3 scarlet-red claws of the flying crane immortal beast stretched out from the void, and directly fell on Xiaohua's back. Slash. Boom! Xiaohua was indeed quick to react, and left a string of afterimages in the air. However, one of the kite immortal beast's sharp claws still landed on his back. Amidst the sound, Xiaohua's back was torn apart, and his muscles were torn apart. The other 2 claws even scratched the ground, and created a crack that was several meters long. At this moment, the kite immortal beast that was hidden in the void finally revealed itself and landed heavily on the ground. Damn it! Xiaohua narrowly escaped a calamity. The sharp pain in his back pierced his heart. He angrily cursed. He knew in his heart that it was definitely him who pushed down the palace and attracted the flying crane immortal beast's attention. The flying crane immortal beast was lying in ambush in the void in advance, waiting for him to fall into its trap. If he didn't see the courtyard filled with immortal herbs and had the sudden idea to come out from the collapsed palace, he would have already been killed by the flying crane immortal beast. Looking at the flying crane immortal beast again, after its attack missed, it swept its huge tail again. At the same time, several immortal trees were broken, and the space was torn apart. Xiaohua didn't have time to put Xiao Guo into the space. He casually threw her to the ground and clenched his fists. Wu He faced the flying crane immortal beast head-on. Pu-pu first, there were two muffled sounds. Xiaohua's fists had hit the flying crane immortal beast's tail. At the same time, boom boom boom, a series of explosions sounded. Xiaohua's body was hit by the flying crane immortal beast's tail, and flew horizontally like a meteor. In an instant, he pierced through more than 10 stone walls and disappeared after raising a cloud of dust. Although the flying crane immortal beast roared loudly, it seemed to be excited. It flapped its wings and its huge body also moved. It followed Xiaohua's direction and pounced. Everywhere the flying crane immortal beast passed, more than 10 stone walls were completely destroyed by the flying crane immortal beast. That continuous palace once again collapsed with a loud bang. Whoosh! Not only that, the flying crane immortal beast rushed out 100 feet and opened its mouth again. A crimson pillar of fire shot out from the cave that Xiaohua had pierced through. The stone walls and pillars all melted and disappeared in this pillar of fire. Roar! While the flying crane immortal beast was frantically attacking, it heard Xiaohua's roar. Suddenly he rushed out from behind a stone pillar and waved the wishful steel staff in his hand. Boom! It smashed into the flying crane immortal beast's claws. In the huge roar, the flying crane immortal beast's claws trembled slightly. A layer of marks on it suddenly flashed with red light. A great impact force was generated. Not only did it block Xiaohua's wishful steel staff, but the remaining force was not exhausted. Xiaohua's figure was sent flying upside down in midair. Shua! The flying crane immortal beast waved its claws very fiercely. Without waiting for Xiaohua to fly more than 10 feet, it hit Xiaohua's chest again. Xiaohua's body collapsed, and his whole figure was once again sent flying like gravel. Chapter 45-22. Roar! The flying crane immortal beast's figure flashed, leaving behind a string of afterimages as it chased after Xiaohua. This time, its tail pierced towards Xiaohua's chest from the bottom. At the tip of the tail, a sharp cone-like protrusion flashed with red light. Even the space was about to be burned into fragments by the red light. Although Xiaohua's figure was unbalanced in the air, his expression changed greatly when he saw the flying crane immortal beast's tail piercing towards him. His entire body curled up in the air, and a vortex of afterimages bloomed in the air. The flying crane immortal beast's tail pierced into one of the vortexes. Whoosh! At the same time, Xiaohua's figure appeared in another place. He did not stop at all, and like flowing water, he rushed into the flying crane immortal beast's body. Without waiting for the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws to attack, Xiaohua had already landed on the flying crane immortal beast's body. With a shake of his hand, the immortal tool that condensed the innate primordial water was already in his hand. He raised his arm, and was about to stab it into the flying crane immortal beast's back. At this moment, the markings on the flying crane immortal beast's scales lit up, and the fur or feathers between the scales began to move. This movement was very strange. It was like the beating of a drum, and the space around Xiaohua was trembling. Not good. Seeing the powerful fluctuations in the space, how could Xiaohua care about killing the flying crane immortal beast? He growled and hurriedly urged his soul power to escape from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Boom! Just as Xiaohua left, tens of thousands of flames flew out from the void, and connected with the red light on the flying crane immortal beast's scales. A sea of fire enveloped the surrounding space of a few hundred feet. Damn it! Xiaohua had already used the fire origin to temper his body, but when he touched the fire of the immortal realm, his body showed signs of melting. It seemed like he did not dare to take the risk. Xiaohua cursed and crashed into the damaged palace. How could the flying crane immortal beast let Xiaohua go? It roared and also crashed into the palace. The palaces of the heavenly abode collapsed one after another, like an earth dragon rolling under the ground. Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios' Suji and Fairy Xingyu were also chased to the left by the Gallium immortal beast. Hearing the collapsing stone walls, Suji's expression changed and he transmitted his voice. Xingyue, quick, Xiaohua is being chased by the Gallium immortal beast. Alright. Fairy Xingyu scanned the area with her mind, and saw that there were 2 celestial phalanx beasts behind Su Ji. She knew that Xiaohua was also targeted by the celestial phalanx beasts. She did not dare to be careless. With a flash, she crossed the courtyard outside the hall, and was about to rush over. However, just as she passed by, she suddenly frowned and her gaze fell on the ground. However, she only glanced at it for a moment before the fire pillar behind her attacked her. Fairy Xingyue had no choice but to dodge it. On the other side of the hall, Suji's body was also flickering with silver light and lightning as he quickly rushed over. However, when Suji and Fairy Xingyue rushed into the main hall and saw the situation inside, they couldn't help but gasp. Their hearts were completely cold. At this time, Xiaohua had been smashed into the stone wall by the flying crane immortal beast with its tail. Half of his body was embedded in the wall. Except for the huge flying fork in his left arm, which could still move, the rest of his body was riddled with injuries. Damn it, Suji was shocked and did not hesitate to activate his immortal chi. However, even if an immortal had arrived, it was already too late. The flying crane immortal beast turned its head slightly and glanced at Suji and Fairy Xingyu. It opened its mouth and tried to devour Xiaohua. However, the entire space in front of Xiaohua was distorted. The stone wall where Xiaohua was located shook violently. Everything was covered by the devouring power of the flying crane immortal beast. Xiaohua's hands and feet were also swaying in the wind like withered branches. At this moment, Xiaohua suddenly moved. He waved the flying fork in his left hand, and the huge flying fork flew into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth faster than a meteor. Unsurprisingly, the flying fork fell into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth along with some gravel. As soon as the flying fork fell in, the flying crane immortal beast was shocked, as if it had sensed something. Without any hesitation, the phalanx immortal beast let out a deep roar as a crimson flame burst out of its mouth. It would have been fine if the flame had not been born. As soon as it was born, a huge explosion came from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Moreover, this explosion sounded like firecrackers, from its slender neck to its tail. Following this explosion, the flying crane immortal beast's neck exploded, and its body exploded. Even its tail exploded. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The flying crane immortal beast, which even an immortal could not kill, turned into blood clots just like that. How is this possible? Suji and Fairy Xingyu were not the only ones who were stunned on the spot. They looked at Xiaohua, who seemed to be on the verge of death, in disbelief. Even the 4 flying crane immortal beasts stopped in mid-air, not knowing what to do. However, in just a moment, the blood chi on the flying crane immortal beast's corpse aroused the bestial nature of the 4 flying crane immortal beasts. The flying crane immortal beasts roared and pounced on Suji and Fairy Xingyu again. Rumble Suji urged the lightning to fight with the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu also waved the star saber and the moon saber to resist. For a moment there was chaos, and no one paid attention to Xiaohua. Damn it, I finally found the flying crane immortal beast's weakness. Xiaohua could have escaped, but at this time he was indeed a little weak and numb, so he simply hid on the stone wall and pretended to be dead. His mind had already entered the space. On one hand, he was looking for an ice-type immortal weapon, and on the other, he was refining the innate primordial water to the sharp points of the immortal weapons. After refining the 4 immortal weapons, Xiaohua naturally couldn't give them to Suji and Fairy Xingyu in front of them. He just threw the 4 immortal weapons far away, waiting for an opportunity to remind them. Just as Xiaohua was thinking about how to open his mouth, the 4 flying jade immortal beasts suddenly stopped. Then, they raised their heads and looked towards a certain direction at the same time. Finally, they let out a few cries in unison and spread their wings. They actually abandoned Suji and Fairy Xingyu and broke through the roof of the heavenly abode. They flew into the sky and disappeared in a moment. Xiaohua let out a long breath, feeling as if he had just survived a disaster. As Suji rushed into the sky, he released his spiritual sense to investigate, and ordered Fairy Xingyu to rescue Xiaohua. Fairy Xingyu pulled Xiaohua out of the stone wall. Xiaohua took the opportunity to fall to the ground like a pile of mud. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and said, "Elder sister, you'd better not save me. Let me die. This space fragment is already so dangerous." Even the immortal beasts in your immortal realm are so powerful. How can we go to the other space fragments? Fairy Xingyue also put away her previous smile and nodded. You're right. This space fragment is really too strange. This Star Moon Palace is also different from what we thought before. Then we should retreat first and go to the other space fragments. Can't we? Xiaohua suggested. Instead of retreating, it's better to go forward. Fairy Xingyu answered without hesitation. At this time, Suji landed and said in disbelief. These flying crane immortal beasts really left. It's really strange. There's nothing strange about it. Fairy Xingyu replied. There are only two possibilities. First, there are not only 5 flying crane immortal beasts in this space fragment, but also other flying crane immortal beasts in groups. And this possibility is very high. I remember that flying crane immortal beasts always appear in groups. Second, the 4 great families and the great demons of the demon clan have also stepped into this space fragment. They have many people and are weak. Naturally, they will be easily discovered by the flying crane immortal beasts. No matter what the possibility is, now that the flying crane immortal beasts have indeed left, we should quickly find the location of this space fragment. Xiaohua urged. Hearing this, Suji looked at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, the space fragment and the meteor belt seem to be opposite from each other from the outside. However, inside the space fragment, these two positions don't necessarily have to be opposite. And no one knows where this position is. Sometimes it's at the top of a mountain, sometimes it's at the seaside, and sometimes it's in a cave. However, this place usually has the power of the stars and moon seeping out. I can use the star shuttle to find the approximate location. Big sister, hurry up and activate it. Thinking of how Fairy Xingyu did not say anything after entering the space fragment, and how she was not in a hurry, Xiaohua could not help but feel a little anxious and urged her. When I entered the space fragment, I already activated the star shuttle. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, but at that time, I didn't find the location of the exit. Ah, you activated the star shuttle at that time to find the exit? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Although he was confused by Fairy Xingyu's smile at that time, he still had some impression of it. He thought that Fairy Xingyu was just testing the immortal qi in the space fragment. He did not expect that she was looking for the exit. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, then what did you think I was doing? The immortal qi in Suji's and my body is very precious. How could I use it casually? Big sister, what about now? Xiaohua asked again. The situation is urgent now. No matter how precious the immortal qi is, you have to activate it. Do you think I don't want to activate the star shuttle? I want to activate it too. Fairy Xingyu said helplessly, but the immortal qi used to activate the star shuttle to find the exit is far from what is used to attack. I can't activate a large amount of immortal qi at this time, or my body will collapse. Alas, okay. Xiaohua had already seen some blood flowing under Suji's armor. He knew that what Fairy Xingyu said was true. He sighed and said, Senior, quickly take some pills to heal your injuries. Okay, Fairy Xingyu nodded and took another pill. After she sat down, Suji looked at the ruins around him and said, you two rest here. Be careful and hide yourselves. I'll go outside to explore, and see what's going on with the Gallium Immortal Beasts. If it's a group of Gallium Immortal Beasts, we have to plan early. Chapter 45-23. Suji, I'll go with you. When Fairy Xingyu heard this, she could no longer sit still. She hurriedly stood up and said, I'm worried if you go alone. I can avoid the flying crane immortal beast without using my immortal qi. You'd better cultivate here. Of course, Suji didn't want Fairy Xingyu to follow him. Fairy Xingyu said again, I don't need to cultivate with my injuries. Moreover, your injuries are more serious than mine. Why don't you go with me? We can take care of each other. Besides, if the flying crane immortal beast comes, I won't be able to resist it. Oh, and if I go with you, I can also explore the exit to the meteor belt, right? But Suji looked at Xiaohua, who was lying on the ground, and said, if we all leave, what will happen to Xiaohua? Didn't you see that he could kill the flying crane immortal beast? Oh, right, Xiaohua. How did you kill the flying crane immortal beast? Fairy Xingyu suddenly remembered and hurriedly asked. Xiaohua was sweating profusely. He thought that Fairy Xingyu would ask this question first, but when they were about to leave, he remembered such an important matter. Xiaohua pretended not to frown and said, "It was just a coincidence. When I saw that the flying crane immortal beast was a fire-type immortal beast, I thought of killing it with a water-type immortal artifact. However, I couldn't take out my immortal artifact, so I simply looked around the hall for immortal artifacts. I couldn't use the ones that were too big, and I couldn't use the ones that needed immortal chi. I just happened to see an ice-type flying fork. The size was just right. I took it to protect myself. I also tried to use the flying fork to pierce the flying crane immortal beast's body, but I couldn't get close to the flying crane immortal beast. In the end, when the flying crane immortal beast was about to swallow me, I had a flash of inspiration, and threw the flying fork into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth." Xiaohua shrugged when he spoke up to this point. However, the pain in his body caused him to frown again. He said with difficulty, "Senior, you saw it too. The flying kite immortal beast was accidentally killed by me just like that." "Well, fire and water are incompatible. I've also thought about using an ice attribute immortal artifact to kill the kite immortal beast." Suji nodded. "But the immortal artifact I found wasn't as powerful as Xiaohua's flying fork. It could only injure the flying crane immortal beasts, and wasn't able to kill them. This junior found the flying fork there. Senior, do you have another look to see if there's anything suitable?" Xiaohua said as he pointed towards the distant main hall. Suji shook his head. "That won't be necessary." Fairy Xingyu stood up and said, "Let's take a look. Maybe there are some high-grade immortal artifacts." "All right, go ahead and look for it." As he spoke, Suji looked around once more, and then he pointed towards the distance and said, "Xiaohua, there's a small hall over there. I presume the flying crane immortal beast is unable to enter. Alas, forget it, I'll take you there." As he spoke, Suji rolled up his sleeves and lifted Xiaohua into the air. Just as he was about to fly away, Fairy Xingyu, who was next to him, said in surprise, "Suji, come and take a look. These celestial artifacts are all compatible. They are similar to the flying fork that Xiaohua mentioned." Suji didn't mind. He had already tried it before, and felt that Xiaohua was just lucky. Now that he heard Fairy Xingyu mention it, he said, "Take them first. I'll send Xiaohua over, and then we'll go out and explore." "Okay." Fairy Xingyu put away the immortal artifacts that Xiaohua had sealed with innate primordial water, and took a few more. Then she urged her figure to catch up with Suji. However, just as she was about to leave the main hall, she glanced at the courtyard again, and whispered to herself, "Is there someone else in this heavenly mansion? But if there's someone else, why didn't I notice it? Maybe it's just an illusion?" In just a moment, Suji and Fairy Xingyu both rushed out of the heavenly mansion, and went far away. After half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua flew out from the main hall, while humming a little tune. He shouted loudly, "Xiaogua master!" Xiaogua was really frightened. Her face was still pale as she looked around, her eyes darting around. "It's okay. That damn flying crane immortal beast has been killed by master," Xiaohua said with a smile. "Hurry up and take these immortal herbs and immortal wood. There's still a fairy," Xiaogua hurriedly said. "She seemed to have noticed me just now." "Oh, really? That's a little troublesome." Xiaohua frowned, but after a moment he smiled and said, "Don't worry about her. Just take them. Even if she found out, she could only be suspicious. Otherwise, she would have said that when she came back, she would push everything to the flying crane immortal beast. What does that have to do with us?" "Okay." Xiaoguo was emboldened when she heard this. She handed a storage bag to Xiaohua and said, "I just put this away. Master, take it first. I'll tidy it up when I get home." Xiaohua took it and put it into the space without looking at it. However, after a moment he asked curiously, "Xiaoguo, can you use storage bags here?" "Yes, master knows. This storage bag is not the same as the one master uses. It was refined by Master Lei Ting using immortal wood," Xiaoguo hurriedly answered. "Hee, so that's how it is." Xiaohua laughed and waved his hand. "You still have a lot of these things, right?" "Yes, master." Xiaoguo smiled and said, "Enough to take away all the immortal herbs and immortal wood in the main hall." "Good." Xiaohua waved his hand heroically. Go ahead and do it. You and Master will work hard together. Move this heavenly mansion into our house and let our Fortune Gate disciples enjoy it. Yes, I understand. Xiaoguo's face lit up when she heard that she could work hard together with Xiaohua. She was really excited. She slipped into the ground and disappeared. Then, Xiaohua saw that inside the courtyard, large patches of immortal herbs were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Since he had already made up his mind to empty the heavenly abode, Xiaohua no longer held back. Activating his soul power, he flew up and went along the side of the main hall. Wherever Xiaohua passed, the armors and immortal tools disappeared. The decorations and jades in the main hall also disappeared. Only broken corpses and collapsed stone walls were blown by the wind under the sunlight, as if they were howling in grief. The Night Dome Heavenly Mansion was really big. There were all kinds of halls in an endless line. Even inside the halls, there were often secret rooms. However, all these secrets were exposed after the entire Heavenly Mansion's restrictions were destroyed. Xiaohua released his soul force to the limit, and didn't miss a single spot. His mind, which could even absorb the netherworld blood sea into the space, tirelessly searched the Heavenly Mansion. He didn't miss a single immortal tool. Even so, Xiaohua flew for more than 10 hours before he finished walking through the entire Heavenly Mansion. Finally, he completed his task and moved all the things in the Night Dome Heavenly Mansion into the space. Xiaohua was tired, but Xiaoguo was even more tired than him. Xiaohua still had some misgivings. He didn't dare to take things that were too broken, and he didn't dare to take things that were too obvious. He was afraid that Suji and Fairy Xingyu would find flaws when they returned. Xiaoguo, on the other hand, didn't have any misgivings. She took all the immortal herbs, immortal fruits, and immortal wood in the Heavenly Mansion into the space. Not a single one was left out. At this time, Xiaoguo had already returned to the space. She looked at the immortal fruits and immortal herbs with some worry. She could clearly feel that the heaven and earth origin energy of Shenhua continent was very different from the immortal spirit energy in the space fragment. She couldn't guarantee that these immortal herbs would survive well after being planted. Maybe. The aura of that medicinal pill. Xiaoguo suddenly thought of the mysterious medicinal pill that had appeared in the space before. That medicinal pill had disappeared from Shenhua continent ever since Xiaohua's space evolved. Naturally, Xiaoguo hadn't seen it for a long time. However, she had already obtained a lot of alchemy techniques from that medicinal pill. Xiaoguo hadn't completely mastered the alchemy techniques yet. At this time, when Xiaoguo saw these immortal woods, she naturally associated them with the aura of the mysterious gold core. Xiaohua naturally didn't know about Xiaoguo's distress. He casually strolled around and finally arrived at a majestic hall. There were many things in this hall, but as soon as Xiaohua entered the hall, his gaze was immediately attracted to a throne in the hall. Although this throne seemed to have been split into two halves by a sword, it seemed to be hidden in the void, and also seemed to be towering over the throne. A kind of unforgettable will emerged from this throne. This will was like the center of the heavenly palace, making Xiaohua feel that it was difficult to approach. When his gaze landed on it, it was as if he was looking at an incomparably huge mountain. Xiaohua had never seen immortal Emperor Gochen's throne, nor had he seen Mahavairakana's 9-grade lotus platform. However, he had seen the dragon thrones of the dragon palaces of the 4 seas. Those 4 dragon thrones added together were probably not comparable to the jewel on this throne. Since even Suji and Fairy Xingyue could not get close to the throne, Xiaohua naturally could not. Xiaohua shifted his gaze away from the throne and looked at the plaque on the jade wall behind the throne. The plaque was already in tatters, and the dazzling words on it were not something Xiaohua could understand. When his gaze landed on it, the words had already turned into a dazzling color that did not form a word. Damn it, isn't it just a celestial venerable? How can you bully people like this? Look at the name of the heavenly mansion. What's there to be afraid of? It's not like I'll lose a single hair. Xiaohua curled his lips and muttered to himself. Moreover, your entire heavenly mansion has been moved away by someone. Thinking about this, Xiaohua couldn't help but cover his mouth and laugh. Wasn't this person talking about himself? Then Xiaohua decided to go all the way. He released his consciousness again, and collected all the inconspicuous things in the hall. He believed that even if Suji and Fairy Xingyu came back, They might not be able to find anything. Xiao Hua had absolute confidence in this aspect. After cleaning the hall, Xiao Hua turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as he turned around, his gaze fell on the milky white plaque unwillingly. He pinched his chin, and there was a little embarrassment in his eyes. It seemed that he was angry because he couldn't move the entire hall away. After a while, Xiao Hua raised his right hand and pointed his thumb between his eyebrows. He whispered. Open. A dark green brilliance flashed between his eyebrows, and the delusion breaker Dharma eye opened. Then Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. Hiss. Chapter 45-24. Through the delirium breaker Dharma eye, Xiao Hua saw a layer of dazzling brilliance on the huge throne. A light shadow that looked like a huge hammer that had been split in half was faintly flashing in the void. The halo pierced the Dharma eye like a golden needle, causing Xiao Hua's Dharma eye to feel pain. He couldn't help but sigh. This throne is really powerful. However, before Xiao Hua could raise his Dharma eye to look at the words on the plaque, he was suddenly stunned again. He stood there in disbelief, and then hurriedly closed his Dharma eye. When the soreness in his Dharma eye slowly disappeared, he took a few steps forward, wanting to get closer to the throne. Unfortunately, he only took 2 steps before the invisible aura of the throne blocked him. Xiao Hua walked around the throne again, but he still couldn't get close to it. When he reached the side of the hall, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eye again. Sure enough, at the bottom of the throne that looked like a hammer, a golden square light shadow the size of a fist appeared in his eyes. This light shadow was like a candle flame in the wind, flattened and swaying for a while. Most of the time, it was covered by the light of the throne. If not for the delirium breaker Dharma eye, he definitely wouldn't have been able to see it. Imperial Jade Seal? Golden Seal? Seeing the light shadow instantly fill up and become a square body, Xiao Hua suddenly came to his senses and thought of the Imperial Jade Seal and Golden Seal he had obtained from the 2 corpses. Damn it, Xiao Hua was a little hesitant. After all, so much time had passed. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu could come back at any time. Moreover, if he took out the Imperial Jade Seal and Golden Seal, who knew what kind of aura or abnormality there would be? If he accidentally fell into the trap, wouldn't everything before be for naught? I'd better go. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said to himself. This is the Yiqiong heavenly abode. Although Fairy Xingyu and Su Ji didn't say which big shot lived here, looking at the extravagance of this heavenly abode, it's not an ordinary immortal. I'd better. Thoughts were just thoughts. If the money grubber Xiao Hua stopped now, he wouldn't be Xiao Hua. After hesitating for a moment, Xiao Hua observed the light shadow again. Fortunately, there were still some differences between the Imperial Jade Seal and the Golden Seal. In a moment, Xiao Hua already knew that the owner of the Imperial Jade Seal was the owner of this heavenly abode. Therefore, Xiao Hua first released his soul sense to check if there were any strange movements nearby, then hurriedly took out the Imperial Jade Seal. As soon as the Imperial Jade Seal appeared, it immediately emitted a milky white halo. This halo also took the shape of a hammer. Xiao Hua held the Imperial Jade Seal, and the halo blocked the aura of the throne. Xiao Hua effortlessly walked to the front of the throne. The shadow of the Imperial Jade Seal was below the throne. Although the throne was split into 2, Xiao Hua was still unable to move the throne away. Xiao Hua released his consciousness. The entire throne was heavier than a mountain, and he couldn't collect it. Xiao Hua looked again. The right hand of the throne was on a square shelf. Xiao Hua did not hesitate to place the Imperial Jade Seal on the shelf. Shua, as the Imperial Jade Seal fell, a milky white brilliance immediately emerged from the throne, spreading all around the heavenly abode. Although Xiao Hua couldn't see it clearly, he could sense that layers upon layers of profound restrictions were slowly being activated, and the entire heavenly abode began to slowly shake. Motherfucker, Xiao Hua panicked and shouted. I didn't want to activate the restrictions of the heavenly abode. With this, no matter how stupid Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu are, they will know that I did something. Helpless, Xiao Hua hurriedly released his consciousness to put the throne back into the space. Unfortunately, the throne was still as steady as a mountain, not moving at all. Xiao Hua was helpless. He hastily picked up the Imperial Jade Seal again. Strangely, when he picked up the Imperial Jade Seal again, swoosh, the Imperial Jade Seal glowed brilliantly and landed on the throne. The enormous throne immediately transformed into a ray of light and shadow. Following Xiaohua's silent chant, "Receive, receive, receive," it fell into the imperial jade seal. With the throne gone, only an empty space was left. Naturally, the naked eye still couldn't see the shadow of the imperial jade seal. Xiaohua opened his delirium eyes and looked at the shadow, waiting for the shadow to fill up into the shape of the imperial jade seal again. At the same time, he was burning with anxiety. His soul sense swept the surroundings of the heavenly abode, fearing that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu would return at this time. In just half a cup of tea's time, in Xiaohua's eyes, a day passed like a year. Seeing the shadow gradually take shape, Xiaohua didn't hesitate to put the imperial jade seal in the shadow. Boom! At the place where the imperial jade seal landed, the light and shadow suddenly exploded. It was as if a huge hammer had filled the entire hall. Xiaohua's law eye seemed to have been pierced by a sharp sword. A burst of intense pain came, causing him to hastily close his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw a bright light like the scorching sun in front of him. Layers of brilliance shone out from a door in front of him. Under the brilliance of this light, his body became transparent. Since he had already reached this point and made such a big movement, Xiaohua didn't have time to regret it. He stepped into the door. Heavens! Xiaohua, who had always expressed his surprise with "holy shit," actually shouted "holy shit" now. These two words were enough to express his feelings. Because just inside this door there was another huge space. Inside the space, there were many armors, immortal weapons, war chariots, and other things neatly arranged. Moreover, in places that were almost impossible to see, there were even more things that Xiaohua didn't recognize at all. At this time, other than shock, Xiaohua only had one thought. Holy shit! Before, I really worked for nothing. More than dozens of hours of work. I might as well have found this space. The ancients said it well, as long as the direction is right, the sweat won't be in vain. The ancients really didn't deceive me. At this time, a sound like glass cracking came from the top of Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua hurriedly looked up, and saw that outside the milky white space, layers of dragon-like cracks flashed from time to time. And in these cracks, Xiaohua was very familiar with the fluctuations of space collapsing violently rushed in. Not good. Xiaohua immediately thought of the annihilation of space when he met the first Tian Xian in the Dawn Rain continent. This space itself is inside the Heavenly Palace, and the fragment of the immortal realm where the Heavenly Palace is located is separated from the immortal realm. Now that it has fallen into the meteor belt, this space naturally can't exist forever. If this Xiao didn't happen to come in today, I'm afraid that after this space was annihilated, everything inside would no longer exist. Collect. Xiaohua saw that there wasn't much time left, and hurriedly released his mind to collect the things inside the space. However, when Xiaohua's mind looked again, this space seemed to be limitless. But his mind was already unable to keep up with the speed of the space collapsing. He saw that a corner of the space had already collapsed imperial jade seal. Xiaohua's mind was blessed. He hurriedly waved his hand and the imperial jade seal floating not far away fell into his hand. Collect. Xiaohua almost couldn't wait to shout loudly. Shua, the imperial jade seal didn't disappoint Xiaohua. A brilliance fell into the space. When the brilliance disappeared, the space was already completely empty. Awesome! Xiaohua slapped his thigh and hurriedly sent his mind to collect the imperial jade seal back into the space. Only then did he feel completely relieved. Rumble! At this time, the space above Xiaohua's head had already collapsed, letting out a thunderous sound. However, the space collapse this time was different from before. After the space vortex, there wasn't a chaotic void, but a starry sky. There were many space fragments in the starry sky, and these fragments were wantonly fluttering all the time. These fragments had a faint brilliance. Some were in the shape of strips, some were in the shape of squares, some were in the shape of 6 stars, and most of the fragments didn't have any fixed shape. For a while they were in the shape of a circle, and for a while they were in the shape of a sheet. Isn't this a meteor belt? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. However, in an instant, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, the exit of the space fragment that Fairy Xingyu couldn't find with her star shuttle was here. It was the place that was blocked by the hidden space of the heavenly mansion. Suji had said clearly before that the exit of the space fragment could be anywhere in the space fragment. It could be at the top of a mountain, at the bottom of the sea, in the forest, or in the pavilion. And the exit of the immortal realm fragment was in the space that was suppressed by the throne. If Xiaohua hadn't taken the Heavenly Master's Imperial Jade Seal, if he hadn't taken the throne, and if he hadn't used the Imperial Jade Seal to open this hidden space, even if the hidden space that blocked the exit collapsed, the exit would still be suppressed by the throne. Even if Suji and Fairy Xingyu racked their brains, they wouldn't be able to find the exit of this space fragment. Seeing the meteor belt appear, Xiaohua's first reaction was to open his delirium dharma eye. Although the delirium dharma eye was in severe pain at this time, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent when it concerned his life. A moment later, the space collapsed to the door. Kacha with a cracking sound, the door cracked open. Xiaohua closed his dharma eye and flew out of the door. When he looked at the hall again, more than half of the jade wall with the plaque had fallen into the void, and the entire hall was still disappearing rapidly. "Oh, my hall!" Xiaohua cried out involuntarily. He immediately released his consciousness and wantonly put everything in the hall into the space. At this time, seeing that the space collapse was about to swallow the entire heavenly palace, wasn't it a good time for Xiaohua to destroy the corpse and destroy the evidence? What other scruples did he have? Soon, the heavenly palace began to disappear from the center, and a meteor belt appeared clearly. However, the speed of the space collapse didn't slow down at all. Not only did it spread into the depths of the heavenly palace, it also spread out of the heavenly palace. Xiaohua's initial joy began to turn into fear. He released his soul consciousness and flew out of the heavenly palace. The aura of the space collapse began to rush out of the heavenly palace and spread throughout the entire space. Xiaohua flew out of the heavenly palace, flew up a high slope, and stood there quietly. His gaze fell on what seemed to be the location of the heavenly palace. At this time, the center of the heavenly palace had become an oval-shaped starry sky, and the surrounding edges were rapidly becoming transparent and disappearing. Moreover, this oval-shaped starry sky also extended in all directions, like a big mouth of starry sky, swallowing the space fragment. Chapter 45-25. Roar! Roar! A burst of extremely chaotic cries came from afar. Clearly, the huge commotion in the heavenly palace had attracted the attention of the flying crane immortal beasts. Hearing the many cries, Xiaohua was already prepared in his heart, but when he turned around and saw thousands of flying crane immortal beasts, he was completely dumbfounded. How was this still the rhythm of letting people live? At this moment, a voice that sounded calm yet was filled with anxiety sounded out from in front of the group of flying crane immortal beasts. Xiaohua, quickly find a suitable spatial fragment. Xiaohua came back to his senses and looked over. He saw that in front of the ferocious flying dagger immortal beasts, there was actually a flying boat. Suji and Fairy Xingyu were standing on it. Behind the two of them, there were many figures. However, Xiaohua could hear Suji's voice clearly. "Okay." Xiaohua responded and was about to fly up. His heart skipped a beat. He withdrew his soul power and ran down the mountain. Although he looked vigorous, he was still far from flying. Senior Xiaohua acted very well. He raised his head and shouted, "I can't fly. Come and pick me up." Of course, Xiaohua did not use his soul power when he shouted. As for whether Suji could hear him, only God knew. Suji could not hear what Xiaohua was saying, but he already understood when he saw Xiaohua dancing on the hillside. Suji turned to Fairy Xingyu and said, "Xingyu, get ready to activate the star shuttle and find a suitable spatial fragment." "Yes." Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and took out her star shuttle. However, when she was about to activate her immortal spiritual energy, she smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, "I've already used up too much immortal spiritual energy when I fought the flying crane immortal beast earlier. I can't even activate the star shuttle now." "Okay." Suji nodded. He looked up at the meteor belt in the distance and said, "You can use your experience to find a spatial fragment to enter first. I'll go and save Xiaohua first." "Okay." Fairy Xingyu nodded. She looked down at the flying boat under her feet and said, "With the Dongfeng family's celestial imperial equipment, we will have some assurance when we enter the meteor belt. As long as there is no celestial kite beast in the space fragments that fall, There shouldn't be any problems. Dongfang Yushan Suji did not say anything more to Fairy Xingyue. He turned his head and said to a Confucian cultivator standing respectfully in the distance, "You will control the flying boat for me." This Dongfang Yushan was a little hesitant. At this moment, the flying boat shook violently, and sparks appeared at the tail of the flying boat. It was the flying crane Immortal Beast's fire pillar that hit the flying boat. Junior's true chi is limited and my cultivation is shallow. It is difficult for me to control this imperial equipment. Dongfang Yushan no longer hesitated and said loudly. Moreover, there are so many immortal beasts chasing after the flying boat. If the flying boat is even a moment slower, we will all die. If I tell you to activate it, then activate it. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Suji's tone was indifferent as he glanced at Dongfang Yushan. Dongfang Yushan's heart trembled. He hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Yes, I understand. I will ask Shimen Hengyue and the other disciples to come and help." "As you wish." Suji nodded. Then he released his thought and looked at Xiaohua. When Xiaohua saw the flying boat approaching, he raised his arms and waved them. At the same time, he pointed at the meteor belt. Suji curled his lips. He naturally understood that Xiaohua was indicating his importance and reminding him not to abandon him here. Suji turned his head to look at the approaching celestial kite beast, then looked down at the flying boat. He nodded at Fairy Xingyu. His whole body glowed with silver light again, and his figure turned into a thunderbolt and rushed down the flying boat. When Dongfang Yushan, Shimen Hengyue, and the other disciples of the four great families saw the silver light flashing on Suji's body and the immortal's pressure, there was not much surprise in their eyes. They only had one thought in their minds, and that was to report to their sex as soon as they returned from Star Moon Palace. On these 3 continents, there were immortals from the immortal world, and there was more than one immortal. Suji descended from the flying boat, turning into an arc in the sky as he flew towards Xiaohua. Seeing that he was still several hundred feet away, Suji raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Kacha, a layer of blue lightning appeared in the void around Xiaohua. This lightning was like a giant hand, grabbing Xiaohua in an instant. Then Suji's figure flashed, and he charged towards the sky again. In just a moment, the flying boat in the sky had already passed over Suji's head. Suji and Xiaohua were exposed in front of thousands of celestial kite beasts again. Aogg, the strange cries of the celestial kite beasts not only caused Suji's figure to sway slightly, but even Xiaohua's Naiwan palace was filled with sparks. Woo-woo, following the cries of the celestial kite beasts, hundreds of fire pillars fell from the sky. Before the fire pillars could get close, the space where Xiaohua was already filled with an inexplicable sticky liquid. The space was about to collapse from the heat. Seeing this, Xiaohua's liver and gallbladder were torn apart. He knew in his heart that even if he used all his soul power at this time, he would not be able to escape from this large-scale attack. Roar! At this moment of life and death, he heard Suji's roar and the silver light around him shone brightly. Xiaohua felt a strong force in the air near him. Then, the entire space was like a wave crashing toward him. His figure flashed and landed on the flying boat. Suji, before Xiaohua could stabilize himself, Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded, her tone full of panic. It's okay. Although Suji's voice was weak, he was very calm. Because the flying boat was attacked by the celestial kite beasts one after another, the Confucian cultivators, who were flustered, immediately calmed down. Listen to Xiaohua. After Suji finished speaking, he took out a pill from his arms and put it in his mouth. He did not say anything else. Looking at the silver light again, he saw blood with black flesh flowing out. Xiaohua stood on the flying boat and stabilized himself slightly. He immediately said to Fairy Xingyu, "Senior, don't worry about the meteor belt. You go and control the flying boat. We will fly out of the space fragment first." Okay. Although Fairy Xingyu was worried about Suji, she could not do anything when she saw Suji healing himself. She agreed and flew to where Dongfang Yushan and the others were and replaced them. Disciples of aristocratic families, Xiaohua looked at Dongfang Yushan and the others and said, "You must have some secret techniques that can be used here. Now there is no need to hold back. Take them out. Go to the stern and block the celestial kite beasts." Dongfang Yushan and the others looked at each other and nodded. "Yes, senior." Then Xiaohua walked to the front of the flying boat and opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye to take a closer look. Previously, under the attacks of the celestial kite beasts, the defense of the stern of the flying boat had been broken, and the entire flying boat was shaking. At this time, Fairy Xingyu stabilized the flying boat. Although its speed did not increase, with the help of many Confucian cultivators, the flying boat finally stabilized. Senior, that triangular fragment. Xiaohua looked at it for a few seconds and pointed to a space fragment in the middle of the distance without hesitation. Fairy Xingyu was slightly stunned. She said in a low voice, Xiaohua, according to my previous experience, the oval-shaped space fragment furthest away is the most suitable. Then there is the linear fragment on the left. That triangular fragment, although the distance is suitable, it is the most dangerous one. We are all seriously injured now. We can't take the risk. Senior, listen to me. Although Xiaohua said senior, his tone was unquestionable. He replied without hesitation. Fairy Xingyu frowned and reminded him. Xiaohua, I know you can see some clues, but I also have a magical power that you don't know about. I think the oval-shaped fragment is the best. Senior Su said to listen to me. Xiaohua's tone was firm. There was no room for negotiation. Fairy Xingyu glanced at Su Ji, who was sitting in the distance, and her heart ached. She instantly understood why Su Ji had not let her control the flying boat when he had come out, and why he had not let the Confucian cultivators of the Dongfang family go to the stern to resist the celestial kite beasts. Forget it. At most, I will die here. Fairy Xingyu was a little sad. She thought to herself, when I encountered the thousands of celestial kite beasts, didn't I also want to die? Now that this meteor belt has inexplicably appeared, I have a chance of survival. Why should I be so stubborn? After Fairy Xingyu admitted defeat, the flying boat began to adjust its direction. Although Xiaohua did not look at Fairy Xingyu, he raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw the flying boat adjust its direction. He was a little surprised, because he was still waiting for Fairy Xingyu to get angry. At this time, the huge heavenly mansion had completely disappeared. The whole earth seemed to have been torn apart by a big hand. Moreover, the tearing force of this big hand was getting stronger, and the speed of the earth cracking was getting faster. Seeing a faint golden light appear in his Dharma eye, Xiaohua understood that the golden light was the boundary of this space fragment. As long as the flying boat rushed out of this boundary, it would be considered as completely escaping from this murderous fragment of the immortal realm. Boom! At this time, the flying boat shook violently again. More than a dozen celestial kite beasts broke through the attacks of the Confucian cultivators and directly attacked the flying boat. Senior Xiaohua was anxious. Put in more effort. It's easy for you to say that. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, You hid in the heavenly mansion to rest. I fought my way back with Suji. Yes. Senior, you have worked hard. Xiaohua said with a smile. Aren't we at the end? We are just one step away. What are you talking about? Is this how you talk to your senior? Fairy Xingyu seemed to be a little angry. Xiaohua suddenly realized that it was inappropriate to say this in front of Fairy Xingyu. He unconsciously stuck out his tongue and did not dare to say anything more. A war at this time, the cries of two celestial kite beasts sounded from both sides of the flying boat. Fairy Xingyu was shocked and did not dare to say anything more to Xiaohua. She hurriedly urged the flying boat to rush into the ground. Chapter 45-26. Good. Seeing the flying boat pass through the golden light, Xiaohua's heart immediately calmed down. He secretly cheered, but just as he was about to open his mouth, he heard a woo. Two more beast cries rang out. The two immortal kites actually broke through the golden light and pounced towards the flying boat at the same time. Damn it! Xiaohua was surprised, but he did not panic. True qi flowed out of his body as he waved his arms outside the flying boat. Two huge fists appeared in front of the flying jade immortal beast's sharp claws. The golden fist met the sharp claws of the flying crane immortal beasts. Boom boom! Two loud explosions sounded. At the same time that the golden light shattered, the two flying crane immortal beasts were also sent tumbling away. Ha ha ha! Xiaohua howled. This is awesome. As he spoke, Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed something in his pocket. After that, he tossed it towards the back of the flying ship. Rumble! The jade talismans that were refined using natural primordial water exploded one after another. Even though not every single one of them was able to injure the flying ship, they were still able to resist the flying ship's attacks. Of course, Xiaohua's attack was just a drop in the bucket. The flying jade immortal beasts that had rushed out of the spatial fragment were still tightly chasing after the flying boat. Moreover, even more flying jade immortal beasts were enraged and began to flap their wings madly to chase after the flying boat. Senior Xiaohua flew in front of Fairy Xingyu and complained, "How can these flying jade immortal beasts fly out of the spatial fragment? Can't those spatial restrictions stop them?" Fairy Xingyu rolled her eyes at Xiaohua and said, "Who told you that the immortal beasts and demonic beasts in the spatial fragment can't come out? Since when did the spatial fragment have restrictions?" Okay, Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Just pretend I didn't say anything. Senior, go and rest for a while. Leave this to me." "You?" Fairy Xingyu was a little worried. Xiaohua smiled and said proudly, "I'm a human Mahayana realm cultivator. In the spatial fragment of the immortal realm, I was weak. How can I still be a scholar here? This is the immortal imperial equipment of the heavenly court," Fairy Xingyu reminded him. "Even the direct disciples of the four great families can't control it very well." Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Then Junior will give it a try. If there's anything inappropriate, how about Senior immediately take over?" Fairy Xingyu was also exhausted at this time and had been desperately holding on. Although they had already rushed out of the fragment of the immortal realm, the flying boat had already fallen into the meteor belt, and there were thousands of immortal phalanx beasts chasing after them. Xiaohua was the only Taoist Grand Ascension stage cultivator on the flying boat who was not injured, so who else could she rely on but him? "Come on." Fairy Xingyu nodded. However, she didn't dare to withdraw her celestial qi. She still kept half of it. Xiaohua stood where Fairy Xingyu was and looked around. The flying boat was in imminent danger. Not to mention that the defense of the entire flying boat had been breached. The flying jade immortal beasts near the flying boat had also begun to accumulate power, preparing to spit out fire pillars. The corners of Xiaohua's mouth curled up as he activated the 5 Qi's unification genuine qi in his middle dantian. Boom! As the golden light around Xiaohua shone brightly, 5 colored clouds rushed into the flying boat under his feet like a waterfall. Buzz buzz buzz! The entire airship let out an ear-piercing roar. Then on the airship, with Xiaohua as the center, 5 colored rings of light rotated like a windmill. In just a moment, the entire airship was dyed red. Schwa! Like the finishing touch of a divine brush, 5 colored clouds rushed out from both sides of the airship and instantly protected the airship. Boom! At this moment, another flying jade immortal beast pounced from the bottom of the flying boat, and the fire pillar hit the flying boat. As soon as the fire pillar came into contact with the flying boat, the 5 colored clouds immediately dissipated. However, as the fire pillar was annihilated, the clouds continued to surge and quickly protected the flying boat. Roar! The flying jade immortal beast roared and flew again, smashing its huge tail at the flying boat. Unfortunately, as soon as it swung its tail, the flying boat flashed past and rushed out faster than light. Where the tail landed, the flying boat was nowhere to be seen. Boom! The flying jade immortal beast's tail did not miss. It hit another flying jade immortal beast that swooped down on the opposite side. Caught off guard, the flying jade immortal beast was shot down 1,000 feet. It was only 1,000 feet, but life and death were decided. The invisible boundary hurricane blew down and slashed diagonally on the flying jade immortal beast's tail. The huge tail flashed with crimson light and layers of marks appeared. As soon as the marks appeared, they quickly dispersed and clusters of runes rushed out. Boom! In the void, an inexplicable aura gushed out. However, as soon as this aura appeared, it was blown away by the boundary hurricane. Then, with a crisp cracking sound, the flying jade immortal beast's tail broke into several pieces. Roar! The flying jade immortal beast seemed to be in pain and lost its balance. It spread its wings again and wanted to fly up. Unfortunately, as soon as the wings landed, the boundary hurricane came out again. With a loud rumble, the wings that were almost bone were also broken. The flying jade immortal beast fell diagonally into the hurricane. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, faint sounds of wind could be heard as the kite immortal beast howled in pain. Its powerful body seemed to have been pinched by a giant hand, and its bones were crushed one by one. When the kite immortal beast's body was completely crushed, it fell another few thousand feet, and was hit by an even fiercer realm storm. Ow! The kite immortal beast weakly groaned a few times before a bloody light appeared. The kite immortal beast was neatly cut into dozens of pieces of flesh and blood. These pieces of flesh only fell a few dozen feet before they were blown away by the realm storm and turned into nothingness. Roar! When a flying jade immortal beast was killed by the boundary hurricane, more flying jade immortal beasts rushed over from all directions and pounced on the flying boat. The loud whistling of the wind and the roaring of the flying boat had already covered the screams. Not many flying jade immortal beasts could see the blood of the dead. They only had eyes for the delicious flesh of the human race. Looking at the flying boat again, it did not directly rush towards the triangular space fragment as Fairy Xingyu had expected. Instead, it soared rapidly in the nearby space, like a proud phoenix spreading its colorful wings and dancing among the many ferocious beasts. Thousands of flying jade immortal beasts covered the nearby meteor belt. They roared and pounced on the flying boat, but the fire pillars and sharp claws missed the flying boat every time. Not to mention the disciples of the scholarly cultivator families who were frightened and pale. Even Fairy Xingyu, who was adjusting her breath with her eyes closed, had a slight change in expression. Seeing that the flying jade immortal beasts were angered by his provocation, Xiaohua laughed loudly. The golden light around him soared into the sky again. The flying boat shook again and flew in a spiral toward the triangular space fragment in the meteor belt. Roar! A group of flying jade immortal beasts roared crazily and chased after the flying boat. Unfortunately, they had only flown a few hundred feet when the mysterious boundary hurricane immediately attacked. The powerful flying jade immortal beasts were squashed one by one and torn apart when they fell to the ground. Seeing this, the flying jade immortal beasts who were close to the flying boat panicked and began to flee left and right. However, the more they fled, the more they were killed. The flying jade immortal beasts behind them did not know what was going on. They still chased after Xiaohua's flying boat. Just like before, after another 1,000 feet, countless blood clots were scattered again. The entire meteor belt was filled with blood mist. So this is what he's planning. Upon seeing Xiaohua fly towards the triangular spatial fragment and kill a large number of flying crane immortal beasts every time he zigzagged for 10,000 feet, Fairy Xingyu finally understood. Although it's a little difficult to fly over this triangular spatial fragment, there are many realm tornadoes along the way. The thousands of flying jade immortal beasts will chase us endlessly. If we don't kill them in this meteor belt, we won't have a chance in the future. If we lead them to the triangular space fragment, we won't have a chance of survival. Even the triangular space fragment will become a land of death in the future. However, thinking of this, Fairy Xingyu deliberately turned her head and saw that the fragment of the immortal realm had turned into several irregular fragments. These fragments were still splitting and shrinking. It wouldn't be long before they completely turned into stardust and disappeared in the meteor belt. However, if these flying jade immortal beasts don't fly out of the space fragment, I think. Alas, there's nothing to think about. These flying jade immortal beasts are ferocious beasts in the immortal realm. They are extremely powerful and have the power to fly out of the space fragment. If they are lucky enough to fly to the other side of the meteor belt, I'm afraid all the human clan cultivators and great demons of the demon clan will be killed. While Fairy Xingyu was thinking, Xiaohua steered the flying boat and flew for more than 10,000 feet. At this time, the flying boat was much closer to the triangular space fragment. A faint fragrance began to emerge in the space around the flying boat. After the flying boat, there were no more flying jade immortal beasts that could safely chase after them. The hundreds of flying jade immortal beasts closest to them were being killed by the boundary hurricanes. After this slaughter, thousands of flying jade immortal beasts, who were panicking like headless flies, began to flee in all directions toward the meteor belt in the face of death. Hundreds of them even wanted to return to the space fragment of the immortal realm. Unfortunately, what greeted them was only the cruelty of heaven and earth. What greeted them was only the resentment of the human clan cultivators they had killed earlier. They had no choice but to die. Seeing the flying jade immortal beasts being killed one by one, Fairy Xingyu's heart finally calmed down. Calmly, she smelled a strange fragrance near the flying boat. Fairy Xingyu seemed to have thought of something. A smile appeared on her face and she closed her eyes. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu cultivated quietly. Xiao Hua activated his golden body and 5 Qis unifications. He opened his delusion breaker Dharma Eye and focused on controlling the immortal imperial equipment. The disciples of the 4 great families and the other families on the flying boat were dumbfounded. They had seen the power of the flying jade immortal beasts. They had never thought that there would be a human clan cultivator in this world, who could easily kill thousands of flying jade immortal beasts. Chapter 45-27. However, they had no choice but to believe it. Moreover, this human Grand Ascension Stage cultivator was the creator of the Fortune Gate, who had refreshed the entire mysterious yellow list. He was also the person who had unveiled the new era of the 3 continents. In the face of such a human Grand Ascension Stage cultivator, their pride and self-confidence were nothing but dust. In the face of such a human cultivator, there was only reverence. Of course, there was only reverence. Dongfang Yushan, Shimen Hengyue, Nangong Pingping, and Baiming Qihan looked at the 5-colored light below Xiaohua with shock in their eyes. They looked at each other and exchanged glances. Then, a look of determination appeared in their eyes. Initially, Xiaohua didn't know that the flying crane immortal beasts could fly out of spatial fragments. However, when he was searching for spatial fragments, he still took into account the flying crane immortal beast's pursuit. Just as Xiaohua had expected, when he arrived in front of a triangular spatial fragment, the last flying crane immortal beast had been killed in the meteor belt. He couldn't use his spiritual sense in the meteor belt, but he could slightly release his spiritual sense. The greedy Xiaohua naturally wouldn't let go of the flying crane immortal beast's soul. He had driven the flying boat through the flying crane immortal beast pack, not only to provoke the flying crane immortal beast's anger, but also to search for its soul. There. Fairy Xingyu, who was meditating, didn't turn around when she heard the cries stop. She only looked at the approaching triangular spatial fragment and pointed in a certain direction. All right. Xiaohua smiled and urged the flying boat to fly in the direction Fairy Xingyu had pointed out. After flying for thousands of feet, the triangular starlight of the space fragment changed. Under the starlight, clusters of clouds gushed out like willow catkins. The starlight also showed 5 colors at this time. Amidst the starlight, clouds covered the starlight, and a flower-like halo gradually bloomed as Xiaohua urged the flying boat to speed up. The direction that Fairy Xingyu was pointing to was one of the petals of the flower. Naturally, Xiaohua had also smelled the exotic fragrance. A tranquil mood arose spontaneously. The golden body that had been activated due to the fierce battle gradually faded away, and the delusion breaker Dharma eyes, which had been opened painfully, also slowly closed. As the airboat crashed into the halo, Xiaohua felt a flash in front of his eyes. Then, an indescribably wonderful scene appeared in front of his eyes. It was a world of flowers. The entire land was covered with flower buds of various colors. Some were purple, some were red, and some were yellow. All kinds of colors bloomed beautifully on the land. All kinds of flowers on the ground were also covered in gorgeous colors. Green vines intertwined between the flowers. Even though the vines looked like they were covered in thorns, there were still bits and pieces of Xiaohua's naughty blooming. Looking at the left side of the airboat, there were layers of colorful clouds in the sky, which also looked like flowers. Inexplicable heavenly light fell on these colorful clouds, and wisps of brilliance gushed out from the clouds. An even more refined flowery appearance filled the entire sky. Swoosh! It seemed to be the sound of the wind, but it also seemed to be the sound of rain. Sweet and soft sounds came from all around, like a low melody. Xiaohua couldn't help but withdraw his genuine qi and carefully remove the defense of the airboat, allowing the fine rain to fall on his body, face, and eyebrows. The wind was fragrant, and the rain was sweet. In the hazy drizzle, the whole world began to be intoxicated. What he liked the most was the sound of a clear spring flowing in the wind and rain. The pure sound fell into everyone's ears. Although no one had seen the spring water, they could already imagine how clear the spring water was. The cool breeze rose again, and thousands of branches and leaves rustled in the wind. It was as if they were singing, and also as if they were dancing. In just a moment, the singing had already filled the entire space, and the dance had already covered the earth. Xiaohua stood there for a long time, looking at the ground that seemed to have been washed by water. The gorgeous flowers were like smiling faces. The drizzle didn't wet his body, but his heart was already wet. He took a long breath of the moist air, and a cool feeling instantly spread all over his body. It turns out that the world can be so beautiful. Xiaohua couldn't help but murmur. It's so beautiful that I don't want to disturb it. Xiaohua, who had always taken advantage of every opportunity, had the rare thought of letting Xiaogua out at this time. Xiaohua at this time, Fairy Xingyu opened her eyes, looked at the intoxicated Xiaohua, and said with a smile, "What do you think of this space fragment?" "Beautiful." Xiaohua thought for a moment and only said this word. It seemed that he had already remembered the word literary in his mind. Only this word could represent his mood. Fairy Xingyu didn't comment. She raised her hand and pointed at the road. "Do you see the flower path on the ground?" Xiaohua lowered his head. Sure enough, among the thousands of flowers, there was a seemingly winding path. It passed through the flower field, slanted over the high slope, and disappeared into the dreamlike rain and fog. Just fly along this flower path. After Fairy Xingyu finished speaking, she closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing again. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. Although he was reluctant to give up the beautiful scenery, he still urged the flying boat and released his divine sense. He carefully took precautions and flew along the flower path into the distance. After flying for a while, Xiaohua had already sensed the awe-inspiring qi in this space fragment. He understood that this must be a fragment of some Confucian cultivation world. Seeing Xiaohua urging the flying boat in front of them, Dongfang Yushan and the other disciples of the aristocratic families didn't dare to disturb him. After waiting for a few hours, a rare mountain ridge appeared in front of the flying boat. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over it, and he couldn't help but be surprised. When Xiaohua urged the flying boat to land on the mountain ridge, a dazzling meteor belt appeared in front of everyone's eyes again. Xiaohua looked at Fairy Xingyu, who had a strange smile on her face, and asked curiously, "Senior, how did you find the exit of the space fragment so easily? Could this be an illusion?" Hee. Fairy Xingyu enjoyed Xiaohua's surprise very much. She covered her mouth and laughed. "Who told you that you have to fight to the death in every space fragment? Actually, to be honest, we didn't come to the Star Moon Palace to risk our lives. Many space fragments are as quiet and peaceful as this flower realm. There's no need for dermic powers, divine abilities, or even flying. As long as you walk obediently, you'll definitely find the exit. Otherwise, how could I let the Star Moon Palace be a reward from Zhaixing Lu?" Xiaohua, who was used to seeing bloody trials, smiled bitterly. He shook his head, flew up from the flying boat, and placed his hands behind his back. There were no clouds under his feet as he slowly landed among the flowers. Although his feet were a little muddy, Xiaohua didn't mind. Instead, he walked step by step. With a glance, another kind of feeling was born in his heart. It was as if he had suddenly returned to the sea of flowers tens of thousands of years ago. In that pavilion, there was a beautiful woman, 2 fiery hearts, 3 cups of heartless wine, and 4 affectionate eyes. Is she okay? The flowers turned into a person again. The beautiful, strong, gentle, and generous Xian. Xiaohua could leave freely, but on the flying boat, how many dared to leave? Dongfang Yushan and the others stood there respectfully, not daring to say a word. "You all can go too. It's rare to encounter this flower realm, and there might not be another one in the future. Enjoy the beautiful scenery here. Don't let down God's good intentions." Fairy Xingyu suddenly opened her eyes. On her face, which couldn't be seen clearly, droplets of rain had condensed into water droplets, falling along the silver light on her face. If one wasn't careful, one would mistake these water droplets for tears. Dongfang Yushan and the others were puzzled, but they didn't dare to refute. After respectfully agreeing, they flew out of the flying boat one after another. Then, according to the aristocratic families, they flew to different places. "By the way, don't damage the flowers here." Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded in everyone's ears at the same time. "Every flower here has a story. And every petal has a memory. You can't afford to pay for it. Yes, we understand. Everyone was even more puzzled. However, when they looked at Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu, who were sitting on the flying boat, they became thoughtful. Of course, it was really difficult for ordinary people to not touch the flowers. However, it was easy for these disciples of the aristocratic families of Confucian cultivators. They only needed to urge the clouds slightly to ensure that they wouldn't get close to the flowers. Naturally, they wouldn't damage the flowers. However, how could such a beautiful scenery be compared to the beautiful scenery in Xiaohua's eyes? Seeing that the disciples of the aristocratic families were following the rules, Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly. She retracted her gaze and looked at Su Ji, who was not far away, whose silver light had begun to fade. Her eyes were filled with sweetness. She whispered, Su Ji, it seems that your divination skill is really useful. We've searched for the flower realm several times, but we didn't encounter it. Xiaohua actually came in again by accident. With that, Fairy Xingyu floated up and walked to the side of the flying boat. Looking at the beautiful land, she didn't care if Su Ji could hear her. She continued. Do you remember the ecstasy we felt when we first discovered the Star Moon Palace? Do you remember the surprise we felt when we first came to this flower realm? I really didn't expect that there would be such a world of flowers in this world. For this kind of beauty, there would be no towering trees, no huge mountains that would destroy this beauty, and no wild beasts that would destroy these flowers. How could I not remember? Su Ji's voice, which had always been calm, was now filled with a strange emotion. It was in this field of flowers that my hand, which had always been in charge of punishing immortal weapons, actually plucked a flower. Although this flower withered as soon as it was inserted into your hair, that moment of youth had long been engraved in my heart. I knew that from now on, not to mention the disputes in the immortal world, not to mention staying in the mortal world forever, even if the immortal 3 decays, my heart would not be defeated. Su Ji's words were 100 times more potent than any poison in the world. In an instant, Fairy Xingyu had been poisoned. Not only was her heart broken, but her eyes were also tired. Even her immortal body was weak. Chapter 45-28. Fairy Xingyu's mouth was filled with a sweet fragrance that was comparable to the sweetness of the flower realm. Her languid voice was a little greasy, and her eyes were moist. She looked at Su Ji and said in a low voice, You can actually say such shameful things. I thought you were like heavenly thunder, only upright and cold. I still remember you carefully burying the withered flower in the soil with heartache. I also remember you saying that when we came back, we would go and see the new flower together. However, it's been a long time since then. Even if there were more than 10 flowers, they would have withered, let alone one. Don't worry, Su Ji. I've already seen it. The flowers have grown again. The flowers are different, but my feelings are still the same. Fairy Xingyu was a little flustered. She hurriedly said, as if she was confessing her feelings. Yes. Su Ji did not show his appearance. He only said in the silver light, There are many female cultivators who love flowers, but I've never seen a female cultivator who buried flowers. Xingyue, although you are strong, bad-tempered, unyielding in your words, and even have many schemes in your heart, just seeing you bury flowers is like seeing a real Xingyue. I think you may be the person I should meet in this life. Fairy Xingyu pouted and said with a smile, Have you met many female cultivators? I thought your story of burying flowers was already a very sad and beautiful story, but looking at Xiaohua now, I seem to see an even more sad and beautiful picture. I think Xiaohua is also a person with a story in his heart. Su Ji did not know whether he was intentional or not, but he brought the topic to Xiaohua again. Xingyue Fairy seemed unwilling to break the sweetness at this time. She also nodded and said, You're right. According to the records in the Hall of Heroes, Xiaohua doesn't have a dual cultivation partner. This makes me feel very strange. Su Ji immediately thought of Jiuxia, who was mentioned by Xiaohua. He was about to speak, but he felt that it was inappropriate, so he did not continue. Fairy Xingyu said again, However, it is said that he met a female cultivator named Li Jing at the Jade Pavilion conference. Later, the two of them traveled together for a while, and went their separate ways. Oh, and at this point, Fairy Xingyu actually looked around, lowered her voice and said with a smile, I also have an extremely secret news. Xiao Hua seems to have colluded with the 9th princess of immortal Emperor Go Chun. How is that possible? Suji scoffed without even thinking about it. I'm afraid you're just guessing. Darling Su, you must trust the intuition of a female cultivator, Fairy Xingyue said with a smile. Although there is no such news in the world, I can still see some clues from the time when Xiao Hua disappeared and the place and time when the new princess appeared. What's more, didn't you see that the flying boat that Xiao Hua just used is the Heavenly Court's immortal imperial equipment? If Xiao Hua doesn't understand the 5 Qis unification technique, how can he activate it? This has nothing to do with the new princess, right? Suji smiled bitterly. Fairy Xingyue blinked mischievously and said with a smile, how about I tell him the news that the new princess has been suppressed and see his reaction? If there is no Confucian family here, you can just say it. Suji warned. If you say it in front of them, won't you be causing trouble for Xingyue? Hehe, I know. Fairy Xingyue said with a smile. I'll just send a voice transmission at this point. Fairy Xingyue's smile slowly disappeared. She looked into the distance and said, the Dongfang family really can't hold back anymore. Dongfang Yushan has gone to find Xiao Hua. Xingyue. Suji suddenly said, let's not talk about these mundane things. I remember the last time you came to the flower realm, putting aside the fact that the 2 immortals were greatly moved by the fragmented space. Dongfang Yushan moved his body and landed beside Xiao Hua. He looked at the muddy water on the flower path and frowned slightly. He gritted his teeth and hesitated again. At this time, Xiao Hua's voice rang out. You are a disciple of the Dongfang family, right? Why are you looking for me? Dongfang Yushan was overjoyed. He was afraid that Xiao Hua would ignore him, so he hurriedly bowed and said, I am Dongfang Yushan, a direct descendant of the Dongfang family. I deserve to die for disturbing seniors flower viewing. Xiao Hua replied indifferently. Since you already know, why bother coming over? To tell you the truth, I'm also a person of culture. Whenever I see beautiful scenery, I'll linger on it. Dongfang Yushan said with a smile. However, I have a question today. If I don't ask senior, it'll be like a fishbone stuck in my throat. I'll turn a deaf ear to the beautiful scenery in front of me. You're talking about the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification, right? Xiao Hua replied, hitting the nail on the head. Yes, Dongfang Yushan didn't expect Xiao Hua to be so straightforward. He didn't hide anything at all. When he answered, even his voice trembled a little. Senior, I have the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification. Xiao Hua didn't deny it. Instead, he answered truthfully. However, this cultivation method belongs to a good friend of mine. I've only received some guidance from him. And without his approval, I can't tell anyone about this cultivation method. Then, who is Senior's good friend? Where is he? Dongfang Yushan hurriedly asked. My good friend is called Wen Chu. Xiao Hua smiled. As for where he is, that's not something I can know. However, when I return to the hidden immortal mainland, I'm sure he'll hear the news and go to the soaring Dragon Mountain range to find me. That's good. Dongfang Yushan smiled. To be honest, the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification has been lost for a long time. Not to mention the immortal palace, even the 4 great families don't have the complete cultivation method. If Senior's good friend can teach the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification to the 4 great families. When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately waved his hand and said, You don't have to tell me about this. Just look for Wen Chu in the future. Yes. Dongfang Yushan nodded like a chick pecking at rice. I know. What I want to say is that I've already discussed it with the other 3 great families. After your trip to the Star Moon Palace, you must come. Oh no, after we arrive at the Star Moon Palace, we'll definitely ask the family head to send an envoy to invite Senior to the 4 great families. Moreover, if it's possible, I hope that Senior will first accept the invitation from the Dongfang family. As he spoke, Dongfang Yushan carefully took out an exquisite square jade piece and respectfully handed it over. This jade piece was in the shape of a bamboo flower. Every fine line on the bamboo flower was carved with exquisite skill. Under the sunlight, the color of the surrounding flowers was reflected. This jade piece was actually similar to the bamboo flower. Moreover, Xiaohua had no doubt that as long as he activated his true qi and let it fall on this jade piece, this bamboo flower might slowly bloom. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was curious and also self-aware. He was just thinking about Xian from the Immortal Palace. How could he accept the Dongfang family's bamboo flower first? Moreover, not to mention that this bamboo flower was ugly, to send flowers. No matter what, he had to find a female cultivator who was more beautiful than the flowers, more beautiful than the jade, right? How could Xiaohua dare to accept a flower sent by a man? Xiaohua smiled slightly and did not turn around. Instead, he continued to look at the sea of flowers in the distance and said, I've just killed thousands of immortal beasts, and am now using the scenery here to cleanse my mortal heart and murderous nature. Let's talk about these mortal matters later. Yes, this junior understands. Dongfang Yushan was already prepared for Xiaohua's rejection. He didn't think that a supreme grandmaster like him had the right to invite a grand ascension stage human being to the Dongfang family. So he stowed the invitation card away up his sleeve before bidding farewell to Xiaohua and departing. Not only did Dongfang Yushan's actions fall into the eyes of Fairy Xingyu and Shiman Hengyue, but in all fairness, even if they were the ones to go forward, they would also seek greater benefits for their sections. However, they were still relieved that Xiaohua didn't accept the invitation. There was naturally no day or night in the spatial fragment. The sky was neither dark nor dim, and was always so gentle. The entire flower realm was like a huge flower bud, sweet and tranquil. No one knew what the others were thinking, but Xiaohua was minding his own business as he walked through the muddy flower path. He looked very leisurely and at ease. If he were to change into a white scholarly robe, he would look like a distinguished scholar. In particular, Xiaohua's temperament had undergone an indescribable change after peeking into the inheritance of Qingqiu Mountain. He involuntarily exuded the aura of spring amidst the myriad of colors. It was rare for a scholarly family to have a few women, so they would occasionally steal glances at his elegant and distinguished figure from the corner of their eyes. The flower realm wasn't all drizzling. After a few hours, there was wind again. The wind was a little tipsy and blew through the air, either sweeping up some of the flowers or mixing in some of the earth's fragrance. His nose and mouth were a little moist, and the ground beneath his feet was already solid. Looking at the ground in the distance, the flowers were completely translucent with droplets of water. The wind swayed the branches of the flowers, and the droplets of water either fell or slowly evaporated. Wisps of mist had appeared in the flower realm at some point in time. The wind wasn't strong, so it couldn't blow the mist away. Instead, it swept the mist away and gradually dispersed it. The mist was also strange. It didn't fly too high and only covered the flowers. If it was a foot higher, the mist would dissipate. Seeing the mist cover the delicate features of the flowers like a veil, revealing a kind of hazy beauty, Xiaohua was intoxicated. Such a beautiful scene should only exist in the heavens. He didn't know when it would descend to the mortal world. After another few hours, the mist gradually grew thicker. The clouds in the sky seemed to be jealous of the delicate features of the flowers. They tore apart and fell down, filling up the entire world and covering everyone's eyes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Just as Xiaohua was pondering what other scenery there was, the sound of rain falling could be heard. First, the raindrops were like stars, drop by drop. Soon after, the raindrops were like threads, entwining endlessly. In the end, the curtain of rain was like a waterfall, pouring down with a ladle. Chapter 45-29. Xiaohua was naturally not afraid of the rain. He squatted down and looked at the nameless orange-red flowers in front of him. These flowers first swayed gently when the rain fell, as if they could not bear the burden. When the rain became heavier, the branches of the flowers also tilted, but the branches seemed to be resisting, straightening from time to time. However, the petals also began to fall. The heavy rain fell like a torrent, splashing loudly. The entire branch of the flowers had completely fallen. The flowers in the rain were very miserable. The petals fell one by one, and the whole ground was covered in fallen petals. The petals floated gloomily in the watery water. How could they be as bright as before? People's hearts always change. There will always be a time when it blooms. Xiaohua's heart felt a little strange. He looked at the sky and wanted to disperse the rain clouds. But after a moment, he sighed and let out a low groan. With a sway of his body, he landed on the flying boat again. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were both satisfied and did not care about the rain. The two of them seemed to be holding hands. Xiaohua turned around and let go. Xiaohua smiled slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw that Su Ji's body was still covered in silver light. His heart sank unconsciously. He frowned and said, "Senior, what about your physical body? Didn't you say that there will always be a time when it blooms? There's always a time for flowering." Su Ji said calmly, "It's time for me to change my physical body. Don't worry." "That's good." Su Ji had actually said this before. Xiaohua nodded slightly and said, "According to the Buddhist sect, the physical body is a bag of skin. It's the most burdensome. That's what the Buddhist sect said. It's completely opposite to the path of our Tao sect." Fairy Xingyu said disdainfully, "Try not to change your physical body. I'm afraid you can't even ascend to the immortal world." Of course, Xiaohua was not here to discuss cultivation with Fairy Xingyu. He smiled and looked at Su Ji saying, "Senior, how did you meet the family of Confucian cultivators?" Su Ji didn't hide anything and told him the whole story. In fact, it was similar to what Xiaohua had thought. While Xiaohua was cleaning up the Yiqiong heavenly residence, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had gone to investigate the exit of the spatial fragment. At the same time, they had also investigated the whereabouts of the flying crane immortal beast. Because their strength was greatly reduced, they were very careful and did not dare to follow the flying crane immortal beast too obviously. Moreover, Fairy Xingyu could not use her star shuttle, and had to rely on other secret techniques to find the meteor belt. Therefore, they spent a lot of time in the spatial fragment. Of course, because the exit of the spatial fragment was blocked by the restriction of the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, Fairy Xingyu's efforts were destined to be fruitless. However, right when they were feeling dejected, they noticed to their shock that there were numerous flying crane immortal beasts residing in a valley that was extremely far away from the Yiqiong heavenly mansion. There were so many that Su Ji did not dare to investigate carefully. He immediately wanted to take Fairy Xingyu back to the heavenly abode. The two of them were rather secretive, and the flying crane immortal beast did not discover them. However, the two of them had only flown for 100 kilometers when the valley became lively again. Su Ji released his extended thought, and was surprised to find that the disciples of the four great clans and some other Confucian clans had actually bumped into the flying crane immortal beast's warning area. The two of them wanted to go back and save them, but they saw that there were too many disciples of the Confucian clans. It was not something they could save, so the two of them were ready to give up. At this time, the disciples of the Dongfang family actually took out their immortal imperial equipment. The immortal imperial equipment of the heavenly court was somewhat different from the immortal world's immortal equipment. The true qi of the hidden immortal continent could barely be used. Moreover, the immortal imperial equipment could also be used in the immortal world fragment. Seeing this, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu naturally had to go back and save them. However, even if the two of them rescued many disciples of the Confucian clans, and used their immortal imperial equipment to escape from the valley where the flying crane immortal beast was, they had successfully lured thousands of flying crane immortal beasts out. In the absence of an exit, Su Ji had no other place to escape. He could only rush back to the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, and bring Xiaohua along. Naturally, they did not expect that they would meet Xiaohua, the immortal Xiaohua, who was good at creating miracles. Before they could see the shadow of the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, the entire immortal world fragment shook. Then, a strong restriction fluctuation rushed out from the heavenly mansion. Of course, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu knew that there was a change in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion. They were overjoyed. As long as the restriction of the heavenly mansion was triggered, they could hide in the heavenly mansion. Naturally, they would not be afraid of the flying crane immortal beast's attack. Unfortunately, their joy was that they were too close to leaving the heavenly mansion. When they saw the heavenly mansion, the shadow of the starry sky, and the meteor belt, they knew that the door of life had been opened for them. Unfortunately, in order to save the disciples of the Confucian clans, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had used too much immortal spirit qi. They could not rely on their physical bodies to absorb immortal spirit qi from the space fragment. When they saw hope, they were already at the end of their rope. At that time, even if Suji did not go down to save Xiaohua, he would definitely not be able to hold on until he used the immortal imperial equipment to fly into the meteor belt. Fortunately, Suji sacrificed his physical body to bring Xiaohua onto the flying ship. Xiaohua, who was good at creating miracles, naturally brought the immortal imperial equipment to the flower realm. "Sigh, it's too dangerous." Xiaohua sighed. He knew that this fragment of the immortal world was different from the ruins. Even if he did not hide his cultivation base, and used the forbidden power of the immortal world as a soul cultivator, and sent out his clones, he was afraid that he would not be a match for the flying crane immortal beast. Of course, Reverend Yun's Pangu axe could be effective. Unfortunately, Yun only had the strength of one axe. Not to mention that he had not fully recovered, Reverend Yun could not resist thousands of flying crane immortal beasts. Suji heard and said faintly, "The flying crane immortal beast is a famous ferocious beast in the immortal world. Only a vitality-gathering immortal can defeat it." Speaking of vitality-gathering immortal, Suji realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. He hurriedly covered it up and said, "Even if there were 10 of you at the Mahayana realm, you would not be a match for thousands of flying crane immortal beasts." Yes, I know." Xiaohua nodded and said with a smile, "I just feel a little guilty that I did not do anything." "Didn't you kill a flying crane immortal beast in the heavens abode?" Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. "Could it be that you're still hiding your strength?" "Well, I do have some." Xiaohua could not bear to see Suji like this and confessed. Unexpectedly, Suji interrupted Xiaohua and said, "That's because I don't allow you to use it. You don't have to blame yourself." "All right." Seeing this, Fairy Xingyu straightened up and stretched. She said with a smile, "If you don't want me to say it, then I won't say it. However, this trip to the Star Moon Palace is really unfavorable. We haven't even flown out of the meteor belt, and we've already encountered so many dangers." "I think it's a good thing," Suji said. "In the future, if we don't come to the Star Moon Palace, the disciples of the 3 continents will also have scruples and not dare to come in casually. Moreover, if we don't pass through the space fragments of the immortal realm, how can we come to the flower realm? The first time we entered the Star Moon Palace, we were lucky enough to enter the flower realm. The last time we entered the Star Moon Palace, we entered the flower realm again. This kind of opportunity is really rare." Fairy Xingyu smiled sweetly and did not say much. At this time, silence spoke louder than words. Seeing that the rain was gradually getting lighter, Xiaohua pointed at the meteor belt and asked, "Fairy, where should we go now?" "I don't know either. I'll follow your arrangements." Fairy Xingyu said lazily, "The meteor belt is changing. The last time we went out of the flower realm, we fell into a pillar-shaped space fragment. This time, there is no pillar-shaped space fragment in this meteor belt. How would I know where to go? You can see the turbulence in the realm, and we have the immortal imperial equipment under us. Everything is ready, so I don't have to worry." "All right." Xiaohua nodded. He forced himself to open the delusion breaker eye for a moment, then pointed at the curved-like space fragment and said, "Then we'll fly to that space fragment." Then, Xiaohua sent a voice transmission to Dongfang Yushan and the other disciples of the Confucian aristocratic family to return to the flying boat. He did not discuss with them and activated the flying boat again. At this time, the rain in the flower realm suddenly stopped and the clouds dispersed. Inexplicable light sprinkled down again, and the broken flower branches tenaciously stretched out again. Little bits of colorful light once again emerged from the ground. In the colorful light, hundreds of millions of flower buds protruded out. Presumably, it would not be long before the entire flower realm would be a world of flowers again. However, Xiaohua did not have time to take another look at this splendid new world. He had already activated the flying boat and left this world that was one of the few worlds that Xiaogua had not plundered. The beautiful scenery of the past few hours had turned into a permanent memory in his heart. Perhaps he would come again at some point in time. However, he probably would not be alone to admire the scenery. He would probably bring along a confidant to spend such a beautiful time with him. The curved-like space fragment looked very close, but after activating the flying boat, they actually flew for more than an hour before arriving. After rushing into the halo of the space fragment, What hung above Xiaohua and the others was a barren continent. There were some strange beasts on this continent, as well as some innate restrictions. Xiaohua even sensed a familiar primordial wave on this continent. Needless to say, this continent was a lost corner of the primordial world. Of course, this primordial world was only a fragment, and could not be compared to the previous divine land ruins. The strange beasts inside were only about the 5th grade origin energy. Xiaohua did not need to do anything. As long as some disciples of the 4 aristocratic families acted, they could drive these strange beasts away. On the primordial world fragment, Xiaohua's divine telekinesis was also useful. Therefore, it was not too troublesome for Xiaohua to find the exit of the space fragment. Moreover, when he faced the meteor belt again, Xiaohua was already more cautious. The first immortal world fragment to enter was a hexagonal plane fragment. Then the flower boundary was a triangular 3-dimensional fragment. Now the primordial world fragment they were in was a curve. Therefore, Xiaohua already had a feeling that whether the interface's level was high or not was reflected in the shape of the fragment. Perhaps, the higher the level of the interface, the simpler the fragment's shape would be. On the other hand, the lower the level of the interface, the more complicated the fragment's shape would be. Therefore, when Xiaohua was selecting a space fragment, he intentionally looked for 3-dimensional fragments. Even if there were no safe 3-dimensional fragments, he would rather look for simple linear fragments. If there were no 3-dimensional fragments, Xiaohua might as well wait. In any case, Xiaohua did not want to go to a space like the immortal world fragment again. Chapter 45-30. Sure enough, Xiaohua deliberately chose a space fragment that was very complicated and almost shapeless. It was like a cotton cloud. When he got inside, there were no flowers or plants in the space, let alone strange beasts. There were only mountains, seawater, and a strange climate. Xiaohua drove the flying boat to fly in this space. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, it was struck by lightning 10 times, encountered hailstones, heavy rain 7 times, and snow 6 times. Of course, such a bad climate was just a simple test for cultivators. It could not stop Xiaohua and the others from going further and further in the meteor belt. The situation after that was needless to say. Under Xiaohua's leadership, the flying boat passed through more than a dozen space fragments in succession. Suji and Fairy Xingyu were surprised, and even the disciples of the Confucian families were amazed. This was because these fragments were either filled with seawater, vast wilderness, continuous mountains, lost human tribe domains, dilapidated Buddhist temples, or barbarian continents where demonic beasts roamed. There were even 2 inexplicable voids. These voids did not have the transmission channel that Fairy Xingyu had mentioned. They were completely composed of thunder, lightning, and clouds. There was no land, no sea, no humans, and no beasts. However, it was also strange. The dozens of spaces that Xiaohua passed through were not particularly dangerous. Along the way, they were quite free. However, when the flying boat rushed into a space covered with green vines again, Fairy Xingyu could not help but say, "Spiritual Master Xiao, are you here to play in the meteor belt? Or do you want to pass through the meteor belt? If you want to play here, I'll let the female disciples of the Confucian families play with you, okay? When you're done playing, how about you take us out of this meteor belt?" "Elder sister," Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "do you think I'm playing? Don't you think I'm racking my brains to find a way out?" "I don't see it," Fairy Xingyu replied. "I just see you flying around comfortably. Back then, when I took the disciples of the star-picking tower into the Star Moon Palace, we only passed through 4 or 5 space fragments to reach the other side of the meteor belt. Look at you, there are more than a dozen space fragments, but you haven't seen the edge of the meteor belt. And what do you want me to say about you? I've passed through the meteor belt many times. Apart from the flower realm, I've seen more than 10 spatial fragments that you've passed through. Why haven't I seen any of these spatial fragments before?" "Big sister, there are millions of spatial fragments in this meteor belt. There are also millions of paths leading to the other side of the meteor belt. Does the path that I choose have to be the one that you have walked on?" Xiaohua pressed down on the flying boat and stopped in midair. He turned around and smiled. "Don't you think that the path this junior has chosen is very safe? You still have the nerve to say it's safe." When it came to safety, Fairy Xingyue laughed and retorted. I never thought that I would almost die in the meteor belt. Then there's nothing I can do. Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders. He raised his head and looked at the green vines that covered the sky and said, Why don't you drive the flying boat and pass through the meteor belt? Xingyue Suji frowned and said, Don't use people you don't suspect. Now that Xiaohua is driving the airboat, let him make his own decision. Suji Fairy Xingyue raised her eyebrows and said, Take a look. Where did he drive the flying boat to? This is probably a fragment of the 10,000 demon realm. This is a space that we have never seen before, right? If we let him fly like this, how long will it take for us to pass through the meteor belt? Well, presumably your injury has been controlled. Suji nodded. If possible, you can drive the flying boat. I won't drive the flying boat. Fairy Xingyue pouted. Let Xiaohua drive the flying boat. When we reach the exit of the space, I will choose the spatial fragment. I see. Suji nodded and looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua, what do you think? Xiaohua's mind did not seem to be in the conversation between the two. At this time, when he heard Suji's words, he came back to his senses and said, Of course. However, this junior wants to stay in this space for a while. If possible, let Dongfeng Yushan and the others drive the flying boat first. Senior can guide them to the exit of the spatial fragment, and wait for this junior there for a while. What's the matter? Suji was a little puzzled and looked around and asked. Xiaohua smiled and looked at the disciples of the Confucian family in the distance who did not dare to approach. He whispered, Junior still wants to return to the Dawn Rain continent? Junior knows that the 10,000 demon realm has a space vein, and also the Dawn Rain continent. If the three continents also have space veins that lead to the 10,000 demon realm, then can't Junior return to the Dawn Rain continent through the 10,000 demon realm? Therefore, Junior wants to see what the spatial fragment of the 10,000 demon realm looks like first. Who told you that the three continents have space veins that lead to the 10,000 demon realm? Fairy Xingyue sneered. How come I don't know about this? Xingyue Suji said. You and I should understand the feeling of returning home. Even if the three continents have no space channel that leads to the 10,000 demon realm, this is still Xiaohua's hope. If he can find something in the spatial fragment of the 10,000 demon realm, wouldn't that be better? I'll listen to you. Fairy Xingyue impatiently turned to Dongfeng Yushan and said, You and the others drive the flying boat first and fly over there. Yes, Junior understands. Dongfeng Yushan and the others heard this and hurriedly flew over. Although they didn't know what was going on, they still drove the flying boat. Junior will be back soon. Xiaohua nodded at Suji and Fairy Xingyue. His figure flickered and disappeared into the green vines in a moment. Oh, seeing a few wisps of green wood light flashing above the flying boat, Fairy Xingyue was a little surprised. Xiaohua actually knows the wood escape technique. Yes, and he seems to be very proficient in it. Suji was also a little surprised, but his tone was more of admiration. Let's go, Fairy Xingyue urged Dongfeng Yushan and the others to drive the flying boat away, while Xiaohua's figure appeared in another layer of green vines in the distance. This was a place full of green vines. There were thick vines between heaven and earth. These vines were either covered with fine hair or sharp thorns. Of course, there were more vines that were born with some strange runes. The vines floated in the air, forming clouds. The original ground was also covered with vines. There were also many spiritual grasses among the green vines on the ground. These spiritual grasses looked a little different from those in the three continents and the Dawn Rain continent. Not only were they much thicker, but there were also some strange veins on the surface of the spiritual grasses. Before Xiaohua appeared, there was a rustling sound in the whole world of green vines, as if the wind had blown past. However, after Xiaohua appeared, the rustling sound immediately disappeared. Although Xiaohua heard the sound of the wind, the surrounding space was quiet. Xiaohua smiled slightly. His figure flickered and disappeared again. After the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, the originally quiet space was once again filled with rustling sounds. Furthermore, between the vines, the spirit trees, and the spirit grasses, there were some green balls of light that were faintly swaying. Swoosh, there was a ripple in the space, and Xiaohua's figure appeared again. However, The green shadows floating among the green vines and plants disappeared instantly and returned to their original state. Xiaohua smiled slightly and did not stay here. His figure slowly flew and shuttled between the green vines. At this time, he understood that the so-called 10,000 demon realm was somewhat different from the 1,000 demon sacred realm. Although they both had the word demon, the demons in the 1,000 demon sacred realm were demons with flesh and blood, which was the demon race that corresponded to the human race. The demons in the 10,000 demon realm, other than the demon race in the 1,000 demon sacred realm, there were also grass demons, water demons, and mountain demons. In other words, anything that could become a spirit in the world was a demon in the 10,000 demon realm. After flying for an entire meal's worth of time, Xiaohua stopped again. At this time, there were no longer green vines between the heaven and earth. Instead, there were some huge trees standing in great numbers. There was some light fog floating between these huge trees, and some indescribable light and shadow were faintly discernible in the light fog. There were even some obscure sounds coming from this light fog. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and took out the Kunlun mirror. As the light vibrated, Xiaoguo flew out from the Shenhua continent. Master, when Xiaoguo saw Xiaohua, her small mouth flattened and cried out. She choked and said, "This little one is useless, this little one is ashamed to face Master." "Ah, what's wrong?" Xiaohua was shocked. "Xiaoguo, don't worry, tell me slowly." "Master, I can't grow the spirit grass that you asked me to bring home." Xiaoguo wiped her tears as she recounted the whole story in shame. Xiaohua wanted to laugh, but when he saw Xiaoguo's extremely serious look, he tried to be serious and said, "Xiaoguo, don't worry, this is not your fault. It's Master who didn't think it through." "Is that so? Master, it's not that this little one didn't do it well?" Xiaoguo was surprised. The crystal-clear tears still hung on her face. Xiaohua nodded and said, "Of course those spiritual herbs are not ordinary spiritual herbs. They are the immortal herbs used to refine the golden core you saw last time. He can't plant them on the Shenhua continent." "Haha, so it's like this. This little one thought that this little one didn't need them." Xiaoguo's tears turned into laughter. Her curved eyes were filled with tears. She was extremely cute. Xiaohua lovingly wiped away the tears in the corner of Xiaoguo's eyes and said, "Don't worry about those immortal herbs. Master has more important things to give you." "Okay, Master. Please tell me." Xiaoguo puffed out her small chest and said, "This little one will definitely complete it. You can definitely do this." Xiaohua smiled, but suddenly he thought of another thing and asked, "What about that Ganoderma? Master hasn't seen it for a long time?" Chapter 45-31. Xiaohua had snatched the Ganoderma horse from Yin Guichong in the sword tomb back then. The Ganoderma horse had turned into a spirit herb as soon as it entered the space, but after the yin and yang split in Xiaohua's space, the Ganoderma horse had regained its spirit body. At the same time, Xiaoguo was also born in the space, becoming the first plant spirit body to take form in Xiaohua's space. After Xiaoguo, no more plant spirits were born in Xiaohua's space. It was as if all the Zhongxios were gathered in Xiaoguo's body. Because of Xiaoguo, who was self-taught in the art of refining pills, Xiaohua almost didn't pay attention to the Ganoderma horse. Xiaoguo had appeared on the Ganoderma horse earlier, but when Xiaoguo came out alone, Xiaohua had completely forgotten about the Ganoderma horse. At that moment, Xiaohua had some plans in his heart, and only then did he remember the Ganoderma horse he had in the past. "I'll let Master know," Xiaoguo said in all seriousness. "I used to play with the Ganoderma horse, but later I had to refine pills and share Master's worries, so I didn't have time to play with him. I saw the Ganoderma horse play very well with Little Silver a while ago." "Little Silver?" Xiaohua couldn't help smiling bitterly again, and the image of a chubby spirit mouse appeared in his mind. Xiaohua's experience in the heavenly prison had left him without any distractions, and he had also left Little Silver in the cold on Shenhua continent. It seems that Little Silver's mother has come back recently, so the Ganoderma horse should be with them, Xiaoguo said like a little adult again. "Haha, if that's the case, then that's good. You all can go and help Master." Xiaohua couldn't help laughing when he heard this. He waved his hand to shake the Kunlun mirror, and brought Little Black, Little Yellow, Little Silver, and the Ganoderma horse out of Shenhua continent. Daddy, as soon as they were out of the space, Little Yellow bounced and said, "Do you miss the boy? Could it be that there was something that made things difficult for Father again? Don't be afraid, the boy has already grown up. The boy will help you." "Hello, Daddy," Little Black said and stood quietly on the side. Master, sure enough, Little Silver was still fat, and his body looked several times bigger than before. He didn't have the spirit mouse's intelligence at all. The Ganoderma seemed a little afraid of Xiaohua. It had been wagging its tail next to Xiaohua, but when it saw Xiaohua, it immediately tucked its tail between its hind legs and opened its mouth, but didn't say anything. "Why don't you guys take a look at where we are first?" Xiaohua looked at these little things with a smile, and asked in a low voice, Where is this?" Goldie looked around in surprise and asked a few questions. Then it said regretfully, "There's nothing strange about it. Father, there isn't even a beauty in this place." "Why did you come here?" "Sweat." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He didn't know if he should reprimand Goldie. "This place seems to be different from the Thousand Demons' sacred realm." Blackie looked around and said with some doubt, "However, there are actually quite a few spiritual items here." Little Silver's little eyes looked around, and a lazy expression appeared on his face. "Master." Xiaoguo was pleasantly surprised. "This little one seems to sense a very familiar aura. There seem to be many companions who are similar to this little one." And Xiaohua smiled like an old fox. "Do you think it's better for these little friends to fend for themselves here? Or to cultivate on Shenhua continent like you and learn alchemy?" "Of course it's better for them to stay on Shenhua continent," Xiaoguo answered without hesitation. To be able to do something for the master, to be able to make a difference, and not waste one's life, this is the greatest happiness. To fend for themselves in this place, it's simply a waste of time. "Good." Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "Master's task for you is that you must think of a way to help more little friends like you, so that they can pull themselves together from this waste of time and become useful spirits." "Really?" Hearing Xiaohua's words, Xiaoguo's face glowed with a holy light, and a heavy sense of mission made even his voice a little low. "Of course." Xiaohua nodded. "I'll leave the task of saving the fallen spirits on this land to you. Don't worry, Master, this little one will definitely complete this task. From now on, they must turn over a new leaf and work hard." Saying this, Xiaoguo's figure flashed as he was about to fly away. Xiaohua hurriedly called out, "Let Qima follow you. Ride him over there." "Okay." Xiaoguo was even more grateful as he rode Qima away. Daddy Goldie smiled and said, "Could it be that you've taken a fancy to some big sister? You're too embarrassed to say it, so let boy do it." Go Xiaohua glared at Goldie and said, "Go and find as many spirits as possible for Daddy. Don't you think Shenhua continent is too cold?" That's right. Goldie's eyes lit up. "That's right, big sister Dai. Watches you and Ya cultivate every day, and doesn't have time to talk to boy at all. If you can find some spirits to talk to, spirits with some lines, that would be even better. Boy will go now." Saying this, without waiting for Xiaohua to say anything else, Goldie slipped away like a wisp of smoke. "Boy, go and take a look too." Little Black was always half a beat slower, and only now did he say this unhurriedly as he flew over. Seeing that all the little things had gone and he was the only one left, Little Silver was a little flustered and made a squeaking sound. Xiaohua waved his hand and instructed, "You go too, and take a look to see if there's anything good." "Yes, Master." Little Silver was overjoyed, and with a flash of silver light, he disappeared in a moment. Haha, Xiaohua laughed heartily. He could almost see a bustling scene of a group of plant spirits like Xiaoguo refining pills in Shenhua continent one after another, and piles of pills were being refined endlessly. Xiaohua smiled, sat down cross-legged, and began to meditate in meditation. He knew that this was a place where spirits were everywhere. If he released his divine sense or pressure, it would disturb the spirits and have a bad impact on his plan. Seeing that 2 hours had passed and Xiaoguo and the others still hadn't returned, Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. He was afraid that Fairy Xingyu would get impatient and release her divine sense, or come to look for him personally. It was also here that some light and shadows flashed in the distance. Xiaohua hurriedly stood up and was about to send a telepathic message, But when he saw the situation in front of him clearly, he couldn't help but be a little stunned. Admittedly, Xiaohua could think of using the advantage of Xiaoguo's spirit body to trick those spirit bodies of plants, but he still underestimated Xiaoguo's persuasive power and charisma. He saw that under the green vines in the distance, rays of light and shadow were floating over like water. In front of them, Xiaoguo was riding on the Ganoderma horse, gesturing and saying something to several spirit bodies. Of course, these spirits weren't human but plants and trees. Seeing Xiaohua, Xiaoguo hurriedly jumped down from the Ganoderma horse and flew in front of Xiaohua to salute respectfully. Master, this little one was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. These are the 10 herbaceous tribes here. They know that Master is kind-hearted and are willing to serve Master. 10 herbaceous tribes? Xiaohua recovered from his surprise and said in a low voice, I'm afraid there are more than 10,000 spirits? I'll let Master know, Xiaoguo said proudly. Of the 10 herbaceous tribes, only 6 tribes have tribe leaders, and each tribe has about 13,000 spirit bodies like this little one. The 10 herbaceous tribes have a total of 150,000 spirit bodies. This many? Xiaohua looked at the light and shadows, and couldn't help but understand. Herbaceous spirit bodies were very thin, and could be the size of a thumb or as thick as a blade of grass. One light and shadow could have more than 10 spirit bodies, so 150,000 spirit bodies really wasn't a lot. Yes, Master. Xiaoguo nodded. If Master is willing, this little one will teach them the art of alchemy one by one. Of course. Xiaohua smiled. Are they all willing to come to Shenhua continent? Of course. Xiaoguo answered. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth here is already somewhat dried up, and herbaceous spirit bodies can't defeat wood spirit bodies, not to mention those beast races. So when this little one said it, they were all very happy. It's just that they still have 2 requests. What requests? Xiaohua was overjoyed. This was a win-win situation, and it was exactly what he wanted to see. The first request is that these 6 tribe leaders want to go and see the situation of our Shenhua continent. Xiaoguo smiled and pointed at the 6 slightly larger spirit bodies. When the 6 spirit bodies saw that Xiaohua had seen them, they immediately lowered their heads respectfully and placed their hands on their foreheads that were like stalks of grass. No problem, Xiaohua smiled and took out the Kunlun mirror, and said, Master can send them in at any time. What's the second request? The second request is that Master can also turn them into a human form like this little one, Xiaoguo said proudly. They are very envious of this little one's appearance. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, this shouldn't be a problem. However, if they want to turn into a human form, they need to cultivate. Master can't help just because you want to. Only when they cultivate to the same level as you. Then they can transform. Yes, this little one understands. Xiaoguo replied and flew over to communicate with the 6 spirit bodies. Sure enough, when the 6 spirit bodies nodded, they once again transformed into a human form with a smile. Master, bring them in. Xiaoguo turned her head and said to Xiaohua. Xiaohua urged the Kunlun mirror to bring Xiaoguo and the 6 spirit bodies into the space. The Kunlun mirror flashed, scaring the spirit bodies into fleeing like water. Xiaohua didn't pay attention to these spirit bodies. His mind entered the space and turned into a jade archive. Xiaohua stood in midair. It was a bit strange. The 6 spirit bodies that followed Xiaoguo into the space were actually 6 vague human forms on Shenhua continent. They were much clearer and stronger than when they were in the space fragment. The 6 spirit bodies seemed to have noticed this, and they whispered something to each other. After a while, the 6 spirit bodies looked at the spirit fields again, and respectfully said something to Xiaoguo. The Jade Archive Xiaohua saw that the matter was more or less settled, and sent them out of the space. The 6 tribe leaders fell into the space fragment, and the dim light and shadows returned. They didn't wait for Xiaoguo to say anything, and floated into the scattered light and shadows. The light and shadows began to flicker, and in just a moment, a pair of light and shadows under the lead of the tribe leaders floated in front of Xiaohua. Chapter 45-32. Master. Little Fruit smiled and said, You can take them into your home first, and then I'll take you to take their original bodies as well. Okay. Xiaohua shook the Kunlun mirror, and his mind swept through these light shadows. Although there were more than 10,000 spiritual bodies, they did not consume much spiritual power, and were taken into Shenhua continent in a moment. Soon after, the rest of the 9 plant races were also sucked into the space. Xiaohua was once again led by Xiaoguo and Jima to a forest of giant trees. There were a lot of spirit grasses in this forest, but they didn't have any luster and looked listless. Presumably, without their spirit bodies, these spirit grasses had lost their essence. After Xiaohua took a look, the bodies of the 10 spiritual herbs on the 100 mu of land were also taken into the space. However, after taking these spiritual herbs, Xiaohua looked at the other spiritual herbs on the ground, and then looked at the 100 mu of empty space, and he fell into deep thought. Compared to the entire space fragment, the spiritual bodies that lived on the 100 mu of land were really a drop in the ocean. In other words, in this space fragment, the so-called spiritual bodies of herbs and wood were innumerable, and these spiritual bodies consumed a lot of heaven and earth spirit chi in this space fragment. If this space fragment was in the 10,000 demon realm, it would be fine, but this fragment was in the meteor belt. Although there were realm storms in the meteor belt, there would be replenishment of heaven and earth spirit chi, but it was still limited. The reason why the space fragment in the immortal realm that Xiaohua first set foot in was torn apart was because the space exit had been suppressed for a long time, and the expansion was unstoppable. On the other hand, it had something to do with the lack of immortal chi. Now the space fragment in the 10,000 demon realm was showing signs of heaven and earth spirit chi drying up. If these spiritual bodies did not have other opportunities, they would disappear along with the heaven and earth spirit chi. Instead of letting these spiritual bodies disappear, it was better to let them move to Shenhua continent. At that thought, Xiaohua transformed back into a jade archive and landed on the Shenhua continent. At that moment, the 150,000 spirit bodies were excitedly staying in their main bodies, desperately absorbing the abundant heaven and earth spirit light that was of a higher grade than the heaven and earth spirit energy. All of them had long transformed into human forms. Jade Archive Xiaohua used his divine ability to imprint his will into the minds of these spirit bodies. These spirit bodies went crazy and were as excited as Xiaoguo. After being sent out of the space by Jade Archive Xiaohua, they went towards the spatial fragment. Master looking at the many spirits frantically rushing away. Even Xiaoguo was stupefied. He calmed himself down, and looking up at Xiaohua with extreme worship he said, "You're really amazing." This lowly one had to spend a lot of effort before they finally allowed this lowly one to see their clan leader. Only when this lowly one's mouth was parched did those clan leaders agree to come and take a look. Master only said a few words and it made them so crazy. "This little one really admires you." Hehe, Xiaohua laughed. He was really proud in his heart. He had done many things like plundering, but this was the first time he had done something like tricking a spirit body. He didn't expect Xiaoguo to be so effective. And when he acted, it was even scarier. Father, at this moment, a slightly panicked voice came from afar. In midair, Xiao Huang's figure was flying over like the wind. Behind him, Xiao He was following closely. The two little ones' faces were somewhat nervous. Looking behind the two little ones, an earthen yellow spirit body that was several hundred feet in size was chasing after them. This spirit body was like a mountain. It didn't have any hands or feet. It flew in midair like a rolling ball. The air around the spirit body surged, setting off a series of whirlwinds. These whirlwinds were like raging waves that pounced on Xiao Huang. The earthen yellow spirit body emitted a very strange aura. It was very dignified, but it didn't have enough power. When it landed on Xiaohua, it didn't attract too much attention. Xiaohua frowned. His divine sense condensed like a hammer. It smashed on top of the earthen yellow spirit body. The earthen yellow spirit body spun in the air and actually stopped there. A burst of obscure fluctuations came over. These fluctuations were mixed with some vibrating sounds like pines. Master hearing this, Xiaoguo hurriedly said, "This spirit body asked who Master was and why you blocked it." At this moment, Xiao Huang had already flown to Xiaohua's side. He looked very courageous. He turned his head and his big tail proudly wagged behind him. He shouted, come over if you have the ability." Xiaohua frowned and said, "Xiao Huang, what's going on?" Xiao Huang didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly replied, Father, the boy obeyed orders and went to look for the spirit body in this space. In this space, there were spirit bodies everywhere. However, they were all ordinary. The boy felt that these spirit bodies might not be of interest to his father, so he went to look for them in the distance. When the boy saw this big guy, he felt that he was more suitable to be his father's subordinate, so he told him about it. In the end, this guy didn't want to. If he didn't want to, then he didn't want to. The boy also didn't force him. When he was about to leave, the boy happened to see another spirit body with a good figure. Speaking of this spirit body, Father, Yuanya is really too boring. How can he be worthy of Sister Dai? The boy thought that if he brought this spirit body home, he would first break them up. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hurriedly interrupted Xiaoguo's endless words and asked, "Get to the point. Why did this spirit body want to kill you?" The boy also doesn't know. Xiaohuang was also puzzled. When the boy saw this spirit body, he used his silver tongue and talked about our family's beauty, Yuanya's strength, and his outstanding strength. The boy didn't say anything clearly. He just told the spirit body that he would find her a good husband. This big guy flew into a rage and wanted to kill the boy without saying anything. Xiaohua ignored Xiaohuang and turned to ask Xiaohe, "Is Xiaohuang telling the truth?" "Yes, father," Xiaohe replied concisely. And Xiaohua nodded. He looked up at the spirit body and asked again, "What about that so-called good figure spirit body?" "I don't know. He shouldn't be here," Xiaohuang hurriedly replied. "That spirit body is very shy, Xiaohuang." Xiaohua nodded and ordered, "Go apologize to this spirit body. Say that you disturbed him, and that it was a misunderstanding." "Why?" Xiaohuang raised his little face and said stubbornly, "How did I provoke him? I didn't touch a single hair on his body. I just talked to him, talked to another spirit body, and he wanted to kill me. He should apologize to me. Also, Father, you are a Mahayana cultivator, a supreme existence in the 3 continents. Boy apologizing to him will make Father lose face." Xiaohua was somewhat displeased. He snorted and said, "Xiaohuang, Father doesn't know what you did wrong. But don't forget, you were the one who spoke to him first. If you didn't speak, why would he want to kill you? How about this, Xiaohuang, think about it carefully. If you think you're not wrong, Father will kill this spirit body right now. I definitely won't let him go back alive. What do you think? As long as you pat your chest and say that you're not wrong." Xiaohuang hurriedly replied, "Father, you don't have to kill him, right? You just have to drive him away." "Yes," Xiaohua said resolutely. "As long as you dare to pat your chest and say that you're not wrong." This Xiaohuang hesitated. He raised his little paw and didn't lower it. In the end he said, "Father, this may be a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" Xiaohua asked. Boy didn't speak to that spirit body, and this big guy didn't have a particularly extreme reaction. It's just that the boy spoke too much, and this big guy became angry. Although Xiaohuang was a chatterbox, his thoughts were quite meticulous. He was still able to put himself in the other's shoes. "Then go and apologize." Xiaohua nodded. Although Father needs face, Father disdains this kind of meaningless face. Furthermore, Father doesn't want you to become a hedonistic son of a rich family who bullies others. "Yes, Father." Goldie was quick to correct his mistake. He nodded and walked to a spot not far away. He faced the spiritual body and sang, "Big brother, I was rash earlier. If there's any trouble, please forgive me. As the saying goes, mountains don't move, water moves, and water doesn't move, demons move. We're all demons and we see each other all the time. The mountains don't change, and the water flows forever." Roar. Without waiting for Xiaohuang to finish speaking, the mountain-like spirit body roared loudly. A fist-like thing flew out from the spirit body, streaking across the sky, and was about to smash Xiaohuang's body. Xiaohuang's figure flashed, and he was about to dodge. However, he thought of Xiaohua's words, and his figure once again stood in the distance, not daring to move. Xiaohua sneered. He grabbed again, and a huge golden hand that was several hundred zhang in size appeared out of thin air. Under the huge hand, not to mention the mountain-like spirit body that was several hundred zhang in size, even the space of several thousand zhang in size was imprisoned. Immediately, that huge hand slightly grabbed again. The mountain-like spirit body trembled and rapidly shrank. In a moment, it actually shrank to several hundred zhang in size. Wu right at this moment, from the place where the mountain-like spirit body had flown over, another thin and tall spirit body arrived along with the wind. Before it could even fly in front of Xiaohua, it immediately fell down in midair and babbled something from its mouth that no one knew what it was saying. Master! Xiaohua hurriedly shouted. This spirit body said that this concubine is willing to serve this young master. Master, please spare her husband. Husband? Xiao Huang looked at this thin and tall spirit body in disbelief. He then looked at the spirit body that was several hundred zhang in size and said in shock, "This difference, isn't it too big?" Xiaohua said coldly, "Did you see? Father?" Xiao Huang hurriedly replied, "It's all this boy's fault. Boy didn't expect it to be like this." Xiaohua nodded. "Explain to this spirit body." Yes. Xiaohua hurriedly flew over and helped the thin and tall spirit body up. After a few words, the spirit body's head transformed into a rather beautiful woman's appearance. She looked at Xiaohua, then at Xiao Huang, and nodded. Chapter 45-33. After hearing this, Xiaohua respectfully says to Xiaohua, "Master, she said she understood. Earlier little Huang spoke too fast, so she didn't understand. I reckon her husband also didn't understand." And Xiaohua nods his head. With a wave of his big sleeve, that golden big hand immediately disappears. And that mountain-like spiritual body returns to its original size of several hundred zhang. At this moment, this mountain-like spiritual body doesn't dare to move carelessly. That huge spiritual body slowly rotates in mid-air. No one knows what it is thinking. That slender spiritual body flies to the mountain-like spiritual body's side and mutters a few words. The two spiritual bodies are about to turn around. Woo, a gust of wind sounds. On the ground all around, spiritual bodies rush over like a flood from the space. The first one is the wood spiritual body who volunteered to go around looking for spiritual bodies. Master! Master! Before the group of spiritual bodies even get close, they shout loudly, "Quickly open the door, we are waiting for you to come back." Unfortunately, Xiaohua doesn't understand this voice. After Xiaohua reminds him, Xiaohua takes out Kunlun mirror. With a wave of his hand, Kunlun mirror transforms into a huge door in midair. Those spiritual bodies who come into contact with the light pillar above this door all disappear. Damn it! Xiaohua looks at the seemingly endless amount of spiritual bodies among the green vines and huge trees. He unconsciously smiles bitterly. This movement is too big, isn't it? Even if I don't want to attract the attention of the two immortals, I'm afraid I can't do it now. Master, suddenly, Xiaohua says again. That spiritual body wants to go to our house to take a look. What is he going to do? Xiaohua is somewhat impatient. He waves his hand and says, even if he can go in, I'm afraid it won't be easy to take his main body in. That Xiaohua says hesitantly. This spiritual body seems to want to send his wife in, but his wife is not willing to leave him. He even scolded his wife. His wife is still crying over there. Ai Xiaohua hears and his heart is moved. He sighs and says, who says plants are heartless and mountains are heartless? No matter if it is a mountain or a plant, as long as it has a spirit, it will have feelings. The Tao of heaven allows them to have spirits. How can this Xiao not fulfill their wishes? Xiaohua, let them in. Yes, master. Xiaohua happily agreed. The two spiritual bodies also fell into the Kunlun mirror's light pillar. Xiaohua's consciousness also followed in. As expected, of the two spirits that entered Shenhua continent, one transformed into an extremely burly man while the other transformed into a live woman. The two of them looked at each other with wild joy before looking around and whispering something to each other. The two spirits seemed to be quarreling, and then they hugged each other and cried. In the end, both of them made up their minds. Xiaohua understood a little. After waiting for a while, Xiaohua pulled them out of the space. The two spirits hurriedly kowtowed to Xiaohua and opened their mouths to say something. Xiaohua said from the side, Master, one of them said that you must let her enter the space, and the other said that if he doesn't enter, she won't enter either. Although Xiaohua's words didn't distinguish between he and she, Xiaohua understood. Xiaohua smiled and said, tell them to go back first. In a while I will go and see how big this big guy's body is. If it's possible, I will also take him. Okay. Xiaoguo nodded and relayed Xiaohua's words. The two spirits left in high spirits. You and the others go back first. Xiaohua's heart stirred. With a sweep of his consciousness, he put Xiaoguo and the others into the space. Where did little Silver go? Why isn't he back yet? Xiaohua looked into the distance and was truly bewildered. He thought to himself, he won't be like little Huang and cause a huge mess, right? Just as Xiaohua was thinking this, he heard Fairy Xingyu's laughter in the air. I knew it. What can happen to you? Sure enough, you're thinking about the spirits in this space fragment again. But Xiaohua, don't you think your ambition is a little too big? Xiaohua smiled and looked at Fairy Xingyu, who had revealed herself in the void. He shrugged and said, Senior, this junior's heart is very small. How can it be too big and too wild? One spirit body to refine one, immortal pill. You have so many spirits. How many immortal pills do you need to refine? You don't know how to refine them now. You have so many spirits. Just to refine immortal pills for yourself in the future? Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua and asked, don't you think what you're doing is going against heaven and earth? Refine immortal pills. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart stirred. He thought of the medicinal pill he had refined for Fairy Hongxia back in Million Meng Mountains. That flying shadow pill seemed to have been made with the help of spirit blood. That was just spirit blood, and the flying shadow pill had such a powerful effect. If he used spirit bodies to refine immortal pills, what grade would it be? Senior misunderstands this junior. Xiaohua smiled and explained the situation. Finally, he said, since the spirit energy of heaven and earth in this space fragment is about to dry up, and this junior's Kunlun mirror needs spirit bodies to expand its spirit energy, why can't this junior take these spirits into the Kunlun mirror? If that's the case, this action of yours will benefit the spirit bodies. Fairy Xingyue seemed to be deep in thought. She did not ask Xiaohua how he could understand the words of the spirit bodies, nor did she ask what method he had used to coax these spirit bodies into the mirror. Instead, she said, however, do you think you have the Dharma power to control so many spirit bodies in the Kunlun mirror? How would I know if I don't try? Xiaohua retorted. These spirits are going to die anyway. Don't tell me they'll die there? Humph, you're waiting for them to die before using their bodies, right? Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua confidently and asked. Xiaohua shrugged and said, Senior, you can think whatever you want. Anyway, these spirits already believe this junior. What a glib tongue. Fairy Xingyu curled her lips and said, Fairy Baihua was fooled like this back then. This is two different things. Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Forget it. Do whatever you want. Fairy Xingyu said. Release the disciples of Zhaixing Lu from the Kunlun mirror. Ah? Why? Xiaohua asked curiously. Isn't there a meteor belt ahead? Isn't it not there yet? At this point, Xiaohua seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He hurriedly covered his mouth and laughed. Haha, this junior understands. What do you understand? Fairy Xingyu said somewhat angrily. I'm not as despicable as you think. I'm just thinking that after the meteor belt, your Kunlun mirror can no longer be used. You have to send the disciples of Zhaixing Lu out from this spatial fragment. I've never thought of letting them touch the spatial fragment of the 10,000 demon realm. Xiaohua smiled and raised his hand to point at the Kunlun mirror. A beam of light separated, and the disciples of Zhaixing Lu flew out from it. They all landed in the air. Xiaohua still said, Elder sister, this junior didn't say anything. This is all your own idea. Spirit bodies? Among the disciples of Zhaixing Lu, there were naturally knowledgeable ones. When they saw the tide of spirit bodies pouring into Xiaohua's space, they could not help but cry out. Hee, these spirit bodies are not fated to be with you. Xiaohua said with a smile. There may be some spiritual herbs, spiritual fruits, and other things ahead. You can go ahead and take a look at this point. Xiaohua knew that Fairy Xingyu had come here because she was attracted by the tide of spirit bodies. However, her original intention was to let the disciples of Zhaixing Lu collect more spiritual herbs in this spatial fragment. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and waved her hand. All of you follow me. Yes, Palace Master. No one dared to be negligent, and all answered respectfully. After the disciples of Zhai Xinglu had left, Xiaohua looked at the spirit bodies that were still pouring in. He was really shocked and thought to himself, "Damn it, how many spirit bodies are there in this spatial fragment? I've already collected so many, but why can't I see an end to them?" The 10 herb clans. How can they be more deceptive than Xiaogua? After a full hour, the spirit bodies that were pouring in gradually decreased. Xiaohua did not know how many spirit bodies he had collected. However, he knew very well that in today's Shenhua continent, the number of spirit bodies had long surpassed that of the human clan. It was just that these spirit bodies were confined in a certain area by him, and the human clan on Shenhua continent did not know about it at all. The spirit bodies of the 10,000 demon realm fragment had entered the spatial fragment, but their bodies were still in the spatial fragment. Xiaohua did not know how the spirit bodies cultivated, and he did not dare to abandon the bodies of these spirit bodies. After waiting for another hour, when all the spirit bodies had entered the spatial fragment, Xiaohua pointed at the Kunlun mirror again. The Kunlun mirror flew into the air. As Xiaohua's hands moved, hundreds of thick crystal lights fell into the spatial fragment like thunderbolts. The entire Kunlun mirror began to roar and gradually expanded. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the Kunlun mirror had turned into 100 miles in size. Then Xiaohua's figure flashed and landed on the Kunlun mirror. The Kunlun mirror emitted a huge beam of light that shone on the ground and landed between the green vines and the giant trees. Whoosh, 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 the spiritual herbs and trees that had lost their essence rushed into the Kunlun mirror. Then, Xiaohua activated the Kunlun mirror to check the entire spatial fragment. This spatial fragment was not big, but it was definitely not small either. It had a radius of millions of miles. Xiaohua spent several days before he finally managed to absorb the true bodies of those spiritual bodies into his body. During the collection process, Xiaohua naturally rolled his eyes at Fairy Xingyu. When the disciples of the scholarly cultivator families and Zhai Xinglu saw how powerful Xiaohua's magic treasure was, they respectfully avoided him, but there were also envious gazes. While collecting the bodies of the spiritual herbs, Xiaohua naturally paid attention to Little Silver's whereabouts. However, when Xiaohua collected all the spiritual herbs, he did not see Little Silver. Strange, Xiaohua was even more puzzled. Did Little Silver encounter some danger? However, I don't seem to have seen any spirit body above 5th grade in this spatial fragment. With Little Silver's strength, how could he be in danger? After collecting the Kunlun mirror, Xiaohua urged his figure to check on Suji's injuries. After all, after falling into the spatial fragment, Suji did not come down from the flying boat. Xiaohua had a bad feeling in his heart. But at that moment, Xiaohua suddenly thought of the mountain-like spirit body. Xiaohua hurriedly asked Little Black where the spirit body was and urged his figure to come to a rare spirit mountain. Chapter 45-35. The spirit mountain had a radius of more than 10 miles, and was shaped like a heart. On one side of the heart-shaped spirit mountain, there was a green vine covering it. Seeing Xiaohua descend, the spirit stone rumbled a few times and the mountain-like spirit body walked out. At the same time, the green vine swayed and shined brightly like starlight. The slender spirit body also walked out from the green vine. Xiaohua looked at the green vine, and then at the spirit mountain. He frowned. There was no problem for him to put the green vine into the space, but it was a little troublesome to collect the spirit stone. It was not that Xiaohua could not collect the spirit mountain that was more than 10 miles in size, but this spirit mountain was originally a part of the space fragment. Unlike the Tongtian Peak or the 5 elements magnetic force, Xiaohua did not know where to collect it, let alone how to collect it without destroying the entire space fragment. After all, there were more spirits on the space fragment that were unwilling to enter the space. Xiaohua thought for a moment and shook the Kunlun mirror, wanting to release Xiaogua. However, with a flash of light, Xiaohua changed Xiaogua to Xiaohei. After all, Fairy Xingyu had found Xiaogua in the Tianfu abode. If she saw Xiaogua here, she would suspect him for no reason. Xiaohei told him about Xiaohua's misgivings. The two spirits seemed to have already discussed it. Although Qing Man's spirit looked desolate, she couldn't resist the urging of the spirit of Spirited Mountain. She flew to Xiaohua and bowed. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said to Xiaohei, "Xiaohei, I don't understand how these spirits cultivate. Ask the spirit of the spirit mountain. The spirits of the plants can't leave their bodies for the time being. As the spirit of the mountain stone, can he leave? If he can also enter the Kunlun mirror. Yes, father. Xiao He agreed, then asked the spirit body. Sure enough, the spirit body was trembling. Then it said a few words to Xiao He. Xiao He didn't say anything to Xiao Hua, so it agreed a few more times. Then the spirit body suddenly turned into a stone pillar, kneeled in front of Xiao Hua, and muttered something. Haha, get up. Xiao Hua raised his hand and helped the spirit up. He asked Xiao He, what did you say to him? Father. Little Black answered. This spirit body said that he doesn't know how to grow spirit herbs, and is afraid that father will dislike him, so he doesn't dare to enter the Kunlun mirror. The boy told him that father is the most broad-minded. He doesn't need him to plant any spiritual herbs. As long as he doesn't separate him from his wife, father will definitely agree. Good. Xiao Hua nodded. Your words are father's words. You can go back first. As he spoke, Xiao Hua shook the Kunlun mirror and put Little Black away. He was going to take in the two spiritual bodies. At this time, a cracking sound suddenly came from the bottom of the spiritual mountain. Then, a wave more powerful than a tsunami rushed out from the depths of the spiritual mountain and spread towards the spatial fragment. At the same time, a layer of light that was almost visible to the naked eye swept across the ground faster than the wave. Wherever the light passed, the colors seemed to fade. Everywhere the light passed, faint cracks appeared on the ground. Chirp, 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 chirp. There was a panic sound in the air, and Little Silver's figure was thrown out like a rock in this wave. Xiao Hua was alarmed and raised his hand to grab it. Boom! A golden palm several li wide sealed off the source of Little Silver's voice. But before Xiao Hua could activate his magic power, an inexplicable rule was born. Boom! Xiao Hua's big hand was shattered. Oh! Xiao Hua was blank. He activated his magic power again, and the big hand was born again. Boom! The rule was born again, and Xiao Hua's big hand was shattered again. Not good. Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. He activated his magic power 9 times in a row, and the big hand was shattered 9 times. At that moment, Little Silver's figure was revealed. There was something the size of a fist in his mouth, and his entire body was modeled in the air. His little bright silver tail twitched weakly in the air, and it looked like it had actually been cut into several pieces. Seeing this, how could Xiao Hua not know that Little Silver had gotten into big trouble? With a whoosh, he flew into the space where Little Silver was. But before he could land, a tremendous and unrivaled will of heaven and earth appeared in the air to block Xiao Hua. Layers of distinct black and white spatial ripples appeared in the area several li around Little Silver like fish swimming in water. Xiao Hua was burning with anxiety. He was about to activate his divine ability to rescue Little Silver, but when he saw so many black and white spatial ripples, his heart couldn't help but stir. Space? Xiao Hua then raised his hand and pointed at the Kunlun mirror. Swish! A beam of light fell and covered the space where Little Silver was. Boom, boom, boom! Wherever the beam of light passed, all the spatial ripples disappeared. That unrivaled will of heaven and earth became even more valiant, as if it was resisting space. Rumble! Very strangely, tiny thunderbolts appeared on the edge of the Kunlun mirror's beam of light, and it started to collapse. Xiao Hua's eyes swiveled rapidly. After several breaths, he tried to release his mind and follow the beam of light. Strangely, wherever his mind passed, the thunderbolts disappeared and the beam of light grew brighter and brighter. A space passage gradually appeared around Little Silver. When the beam of light completely enveloped Little Silver, his figure was also revealed. Only then did Xiao Hua see that what Little Silver was holding in his mouth was something that looked like a gallbladder. This thing was covered in hair-thin cracks that went deep into its core. However, from these cracks, thousands of tiny rays of light flickered. These tiny rays of light came from a crystal grain that was almost invisible to the naked eye at the core of the gallbladder. The will of heaven and earth and the indescribable nomological laws came from this crystal grain. It was very clear that the will of heaven and earth and the nomological laws weren't something that the Kunlun mirror's beam of light could resist. But when they came into contact with Xiao Hua's mind, their strong sense of resistance weakened. Master, hurry! Little Silver could finally speak. and he cried out in his heart, "This is a good thing, hurry up and put it away." Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had wanted Little Silver to find some good things, but he hadn't wanted Little Silver to make such a big fuss. Master, seeing Xiaohua hesitate, Little Silver urged, "My father said that if a man wants to do something, he should do it big. There's nothing in this space that's worthy of this little one's hand. Only this thing can be seen in this little one's eyes." Okay. Seeing that Little Silver was as greedy as he was and as arrogant as Little Yellow, Xiaohua smiled, and was about to put it away with his mind. But just then, two tyrannical thoughts swept over from afar, and Fairy Xingyu cried out in surprise, Is this a spirit gallbladder?" "This? I've never seen or heard of it before." Suji's tired voice rang out. After a few breaths, two silhouettes with silver light stepped out of the spatial ripples. It was Fairy Xingyu and Suji. At that moment, Suji was already able to reveal his human form, but the silver light had fused with the armor from earlier to protect his entire body. His head was still covered by the faint silver light, and his appearance couldn't be seen. This faint silver light gave off boundless majesty. It wasn't just Little Silver and the two spirits, but even Xiaohua felt an indescribable pressure. Senior Xiaohua hurriedly asked, "Can you still maintain your physical body?" I should be able to last until we reach the starry sky maze." Suji nodded in reply, his expression hidden. "This spirit-seeking mouse is your spirit pet?" "Yes, Senior," Xiaohua said with a smile. "When this junior sent the star-picking tower disciples out just now, I also let him out in passing, wanting him to find a treasure for this junior. Who would have thought that he would actually find this thing? I just don't know. What is this spirit gallbladder?" Spirit gallbladder, as the name implies, is the gallbladder of the spiritual world. Fairy Xingyu's voice was full of envy. Looking at the fist-sized gallbladder, she explained, "It is the foundation of the spirit chi world. The spirit chi world is born from the spirit gallbladder, and the spirit gallbladder also dies when the spirit chi world is annihilated." "Xiaohua, you actually got this thing. I don't know if your luck is good or bad." "Oh, what does Senior mean?" Xiaohua seemed to understand something. He looked at Fairy Xingyu with a smile and said, "This junior's luck has always been good." "Of course your luck is good." Fairy Xingyu nodded and said, "We thought this fragment was a corner of the 10,000 demon realm. But I was wrong. This fragment should be a fragment of a world parallel to the 10,000 demon realm. And it definitely isn't the 10,000 demon realm, because the spirit gallbladder of the 10,000 demon realm is in the 10,000 demon realm. It can't be in this fragment. However, your luck doesn't seem to be as good as you think. Although this fragment is the core of a world, this world has collapsed. If it weren't for a coincidence, this space fragment wouldn't exist here. It would have been annihilated long ago. Of course, since the spirit gallbladder has been taken away by you, this space fragment will no longer have spirit chi. The fragment will eventually become fragments and won't exist for long. As for this spirit gallbladder, it is on the verge of annihilation. Even if you get it, it will be meaningless to you. Those spirit bodies can provide spirit chi in your Kunlun Wonderland and maintain it, but this spirit gallbladder is not something that your Kunlun Wonderland can nourish." Xiaohua frowned and said, "Even if I put this spirit gallbladder back now, it probably won't work, right?" "Of course." Fairy Xingyu nodded. "If the spirit gallbladder wasn't about to be annihilated and the core of this world was about to shatter, it would be absolutely impossible for your spirit pet to take the spirit gallbladder out of the core of the fragment." "What about the spirit bodies on this space fragment?" Xiaohua asked hurriedly. "What will happen to them?" Fairy Xingyu glanced at Xiaohua and asked, "Do you still need to ask?" "Well, this junior understands." Xiaohua nodded and asked again, "Senior, this spirit body is the spirit of the spirit mountain. Do you have the means to pull this spirit mountain out? This junior can take this spirit mountain into the Kunlun mirror." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.